A gunshot shattered the silence of Red Willow, Kansas, and Cole Rourke didn't flinch. The war-scarred cowboy had trained himself not to feel, not fear, not hope, certainly not love. For 8 years, he'd turned away every kindness, every offer of warmth, building walls higher than the prairie grass. But when Lillian Hart stumbled bleeding into the street, pursued by the most dangerous man in 3 counties, Cole made a choice that would crack those walls wide open. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The second gunshot came from Brant Sykes' saloon. Cole had just stepped onto Hutchins' grocery porch, his weekly flour sack under one arm, when the sharp crack of a pistol split the afternoon air. Main Street froze. Women gathered their children. Men's hands drifted toward holsters. But Cole Rourke stood perfectly still, his gray eyes fixed on the saloon's double doors like he was reading a book, only he could see. 32 years old. 6 feet of weathered leather and silence. Hair the color of dust after rain, face carved by wind and something harder than weather. The people of Red Willow, Kansas knew Cole as the rancher who never smiled, never danced at the harvest socials, never accepted the casseroles Widow Pritchard left on his porch every Thursday, like clockwork. That man's heart is locked up tighter than the bank vault, the barber once said. Locked ain't the word, replied Sheriff Drummond. Try buried. They weren't wrong. Cole had returned from the war in '65 with a limp he'd learned to hide and wounds no doctor could stitch. He'd bought the Rourke Ranch with money that tasted like blood and built a life of deliberate solitude. Cattle didn't ask questions. Fences didn't pity. The land took what you gave and returned what it promised. Nothing more, nothing less. Fair trade. The townspeople had tried, bless them. They'd invited him to quilting bees and church suppers, introduced him to their daughters, nieces, cousins twice removed. Margaret Finch had baked him an apple pie with her telephone number written in cinnamon on the crust. Clara Desmond had accidentally fallen into his arms outside the feed store, smelling of lilac water and desperation. Cole had helped Clara to her feet with the same gentle firmness he'd use on a spooked horse, tipped his hat, and walked away. "What's wrong with him?" Clara had hissed to her sister. "Maybe nothing's wrong," her sister replied quietly. "Maybe he's just broken in ways we can't fix." The truth was simpler and more complicated than that. Cole had learned the mathematics of loss early. His mother, taken by cholera when he was 9. His father, crushed under a horse 3 years later. His best friend Tommy Chen, who'd enlisted beside him and died in his arms at Shiloh, whispering about the girl back home who'd never wear the wedding dress she'd already sewn. Every person Cole had ever loved had been erased like pencil marks on paper, so he'd stopped writing. He'd returned to Kansas in 1865 with a single philosophy. Caring was the highway to grief, and he was done traveling that road. He worked his ranch with methodical precision. He was fair to his hired men, paid them on time, never raised his voice. He helped neighbors mend fences and pull calves in difficult births. He donated anonymously to the school fund and the widow's relief. But he never let anyone close enough to matter. "You can't live like a ghost forever, Cole," Nora Beckett had told him last summer while her 5 children ran circles around her kitchen like small tornadoes. Nora was one of the few people whose company Cole could tolerate, maybe because she never tried to fix him, just accepted him like weather. "Seems to be working fine so far," Cole had replied, accepting a cup of coffee. "Working ain't the same as living." "Close enough." Now, standing on Hutchins' porch with that second gunshot still echoing off the buildings, Cole felt the old instinct rise in his chest. The one that said, "Walk away, this isn't your business. Caring leads to complications." He was actually turning to do exactly that when the saloon doors exploded outward. A woman burst into the street. She wore a torn traveling dress the color of deep water, her dark hair escaping its pins in wild curls. Blood streaked her left sleeve. She clutched a small leather valise against her chest like it contained the only thing in the world worth saving, and her eyes, even from 30 yards away, Cole could see the fierce intelligence burning in them, swept the street looking for escape, for help, for anything. Behind her, Brant Sykes filled the doorway like a bad dream taking shape. "You think you can run from a signed contract, darling?" Brant's voice carried the oily charm of a snake oil salesman mixed with the meanness of a man who enjoyed watching things break. "That's theft. That's a legal matter." Legal? The woman spun to face him, and Cole saw her face properly for the first time. Sharp cheekbones, full mouth, eyes that blazed with anger instead of fear. You call lying about employment terms legal? You call locking women in rooms legal? I call honoring your agreements legal. Brant descended the steps slowly, deliberately. 6'4", shoulders like a bull, hands that had broken more than one man's jaw for looking at him wrong. He owned the saloon, the lumber mill, half the farmland between here and Dodge City, and considered himself entitled to whatever else caught his fancy. You signed papers, Miss Hart. I signed papers to play piano for your establishment, Mr. Sykes. To perform music, that's all. Her voice didn't shake. Cole found that remarkable. Brant Sykes made grown men stammer. We can discuss the specifics of your performance upstairs. Brant's smile would have looked friendly to anyone who didn't notice his right hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Private-like. The street had emptied. Windows showed the pale faces of witnesses who wouldn't intervene. This was Brant Sykes' town in all the ways that mattered. The sheriff was his cousin. The judge owed him money. The good people of Red Willow had learned that standing up to Brant meant losing your business, your property, sometimes your teeth. Cole knew all this. Cole had specifically structured his life to avoid exactly this type of situation. Cole was absolutely certain that the smart thing, the safe thing, was to walk away. Instead, he heard his boots hitting the dusty street. The woman's eyes found him first. Up close, he revised his earlier assessment. She wasn't just fierce, she was furious. And underneath the fury, exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from fighting battles you never expected to face. This doesn't concern you, Rourke. Brant didn't even look at him. Go back to your cows. Cole stopped 3 feet away, close enough to smell the whiskey on Brant's breath and see the small bruise forming on the woman's jaw. His hands stayed loose at his sides, but every line of his body spoke a language Brant understood. Seems like the lady wants to leave. The lady, Brant emphasized the word like it was something dirty, signed a contract for 6 months' employment. We're 2 days in. She's got a debt to pay. What debt? Train fare from St. Louis, room and board. The advance I gave her in good faith. Cole turned to the woman for the first time. That true? She met his eyes without flinching. The train fare is true. He paid $17. The room is a storage closet with a cot. The board is stale bread and weak coffee, and the advance was $20 he handed me with one hand while locking the door with the other. So you owe him $37. Something flashed in her eyes. Disappointment, maybe. Like he'd been an unexpected hope and was already proving to be just another man who'd side with power over principle. I suppose that's one way to calculate it, yes. Cole reached into his coat pocket. The motion made Brant's hand tighten on his pistol, but Cole moved with that same deliberate slowness, pulling out a worn leather wallet. He counted out bills with the methodical precision he brought to everything. 10, 20, 30, 40. He held the money toward Brant. Here's $40. Covers the debt and leaves her $3 for her trouble. We're done. Brant didn't take the money. He was staring at Cole like he'd just started speaking Mandarin. What the hell are you doing, Rourke? Ending a bad contract. You don't get a say in my business dealings. Just did. The street had gone silent. Someone's horse stamped nervously at the hitching post. A shutter creaked in the wind. Cole kept his hand extended, the bills fluttering slightly, his face empty of everything except a patience that somehow felt more dangerous than anger. Brant's face darkened. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. She's a thief and a liar. Probably a whore, too. The woman inhaled sharply, but before she could speak, Cole's voice cut through the space between them like a knife through leather. Take the money, Brant. 3 words. Quiet. Absolutely flat. But something in them made Brant Sykes, who'd broken men twice his size, who'd run competitors out of business and enemies out of town, take an involuntary step backward. Because Cole Rourke never threatened, never raised his voice, never showed emotion, which meant when he did show up for something, he showed up complete. Brant snatched the money, counted it with quick, angry movements. This doesn't make her your problem, Rourke. It just makes you $40 poorer. I'll survive. Yeah? Let's see how long that lasts when you start collecting strays. Brant stuffed the bills into his vest pocket. This town's got a limited tolerance for heroes. You might want to remember that. He turned and stalked back into the saloon, pushing through the doors hard enough to make them bang against the walls. Cole stood there for a moment, watching the doors swing on their hinges, waiting to see if Brant would come back. He didn't. The tension leaked out of the street like air from a punctured tire. Windows began opening. People emerged onto porches, pretending they'd been occupied with other things the whole time. Only then did Cole turn to the woman. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and fury, confusion and calculation. Her knuckles were white around the handle of her valise. "I didn't ask for your help," she said. "Noticed that." "I can pay you back." "Don't want it." "I don't accept charity." "Wasn't charity, was a purchase. Bought out a bad contract, same as I'd buy cattle out of a bad situation." He realized how that sounded a second too late. "Didn't mean, I know exactly what you meant." Her voice could have etched glass. "You saw a woman in trouble and decided to solve the problem with money. Very efficient, very noble. And now I'm supposed to be grateful that I've been bought by a better class of owner." Cole felt heat creep up his neck. Not anger, but something worse. Shame. Because she was right. He'd reduced her to a transaction, solved her like a problem, the same way he approached everything in his carefully controlled life. "You're right," he said. "That was wrong of me." She blinked. Apparently she hadn't expected agreement. "I apologize," Cole continued. "You're not cattle. You're a person. A person who was in a bad situation and didn't have many options." He hesitated, then added, "But for what it's worth, you're free now. No debt, no obligation. To Brant or to me." "Free." She tested the word like it might be a trick. "Just like that. Just like that. And what do you expect in return for this $40 freedom, Mr. Rourke, Cole Rourke?" "And I don't expect anything." "Everyone expects something." "Then I guess I'm not everyone." They stood there in the settling dust, two strangers tied together by $40 and a broken contract, neither quite sure what to do next. Cole became aware that half the town was watching from windows and porches, including Nora Beckett, who'd emerged from the general store with her youngest on her hip and a knowing smile on her weathered face. The woman followed his gaze, saw the audience, and lifted her chin. "I need somewhere safe to stay. Somewhere Brant Sykes won't find me." "Nora Beckett runs a farm 3 miles east, takes in workers and boarders. She's good people." "And you trust her?" Cole considered the question. "Much as I trust anyone." "That's not exactly a ringing endorsement." "It's the best I've got." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across her face, gone too quick to be sure. "Fair enough. Can you take me there?" Every instinct Cole had developed over the past 8 years screamed at him to point the way and walk in the opposite direction. Getting involved led to complications. Complications led to caring. Caring led to loss. He'd just spent $40. That was already more involvement than he'd had with another human being in years. But Nora's farm was 3 miles through open country, and Brant Sykes had a mean streak wider than the Kansas plains. "I've got a wagon around back," he heard himself say. "Give me 5 minutes." She nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "Thank you, Mr. Rourke." "Cole?" "I beg your pardon?" "Name's Cole. No need for formality when you've already cost me $40. He meant it as a joke, but it came out flat, rusty from disuse. She studied him for a long moment, and Cole had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing right through his carefully constructed walls. "Lillian Hart. And for the record, I didn't cost you anything. You made a choice." "That I did." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. Why? 1,000 reasons. None of them. Because Brant Sykes was a bully and Cole hated bullies. Because she'd reminded him of something he'd forgotten. Because, for one moment, standing there with a gun at her back and fire in her eyes, she'd looked like the opposite of everything dead inside him. "Seemed like the right thing to do," he said finally. "Seemed like the expensive thing to do." "Sometimes they're the same." Lillian Hart's eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. "I think you're more complicated than you pretend to be, Cole Rourke. I think you're wrong. We'll see." She said it with the certainty of someone who'd made a study of reading people. And Cole felt an unfamiliar flutter of something in his chest. Not fear exactly, but close. The sense that this woman could become dangerous to his carefully maintained solitude. He turned toward the alley where he'd left his wagon, calling over his shoulder, 5 minutes! Don't go anywhere Brant can see you. Where would I go? It was a real question, not rhetorical. Cole heard the exhaustion underneath it, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd traveled a long way on empty promises. Mrs. Hutchins makes good coffee, he said, nodding toward the grocery. Tell her Cole said to put it on my tab. He didn't wait for her response, just walked away before he could do something stupid like offer her more than coffee. Like ask what had brought her all the way from St. Louis to this dusty Kansas town. Like wonder what kind of music she played and whether she ever smiled when she thought no one was watching. The wagon was where he'd left it. His 2 horses, steady and true, named for the only virtues that mattered, dozing in the afternoon heat. Cole checked the harness automatically, his hands working through familiar motions while his mind tried to catch up with what he'd just done. $40. He'd paid $40 for a stranger. That was half a month's profit. That was new fence posts for the south pasture. That was the practical, sensible choice being trampled by something he couldn't quite name. Well, hell, he muttered to Steady, who flicked an ear in response. Talking to yourself now, Cole? Nora Beckett appeared at the mouth of the alley, her youngest daughter perched on one hip, 3 more children orbiting her like small planets. At 45, Nora had buried 2 husbands and raised 7 kids on land that fought back against every seed planted. She had laugh lines deep as river valleys and eyes that missed nothing. Just thinking out loud, that was quite a show back there. Wasn't trying to put on a show. No, you never are. Nora shifted her daughter to her other hip. Bringing her to my place? If that's all right. Of course it's all right. Could use help with the harvest anyway, and if she can actually play piano like Brant claimed, the children would love it. Nora's expression turned serious. Brant's not going to let this go, you know. I know. He'll make it personal. Let him. Nora studied him the way she might study a horse she was considering purchasing, looking for soundness, spirit, hidden flaws. You're different today. Same as always. No, there's something in your eyes I haven't seen in years. She smiled, soft and knowing. Looks almost like feeling. Cole turned back to his horses, checking straps that didn't need checking. You're imagining things. Am I? Nora's voice was gentle, the kind of gentle that hurt worse than harsh words. Cole, you're a good man. One of the best I know. But you've been living like you're already dead. Like that war took more than your friends. It took your future, too. Nora, shh. I'm not trying to fix you. I know better than that. She touched his arm briefly, a butterfly landing. I'm just saying, maybe $40 for a stranger is the smartest thing you've spent money on in 8 years. She left before he could respond, herding her children back toward the general store, and Cole was alone with his horses and the uncomfortable truth that Nora Beckett saw too much. He finished with the wagon and drove it around to the front of Hutchins' grocery. Lillian Hart was waiting on the porch, standing straight-backed despite the exhaustion Cole could see in the tight set of her shoulders. She'd pinned her hair back up and wiped the dust from her face, transforming herself from desperate refugee to composed traveler with nothing more than determination and spit. She climbed onto the wagon seat without waiting for help, settling her valise between them like a small fortress. Cole clicked his tongue and the horses started forward, their hooves raising little puffs of dust that hung in the still air. Main Street slid past. The bank, the feed store, the church with its white steeple pointing at the endless sky. People watched from windows and porches, and Cole could feel their curiosity like heat on his back. They left the town behind, following the rutted road east toward Nora's farm. The prairie opened up around them, grassland rolling to the horizon under a sky so big it made everything else seem temporary. Late afternoon sun slanted gold across the landscape, catching in the seed heads and turning the whole world into something almost beautiful. Lillian broke the silence first. How long have you lived here? All my life, except for the war years. You fought? Most men my age did. Which side? Cole glanced at her, surprised by the directness. Union, though Kansas was complicated. Brother fought brother in these parts. She nodded like he'd confirmed something she'd suspected. And you came back to ranching. Seemed like the thing to do. The thing to do or the thing to hide in? The words hit harder than a fist. Cole's hands tightened on the reins and Steady tossed his head in response to the sudden tension. He forced himself to relax his grip. You always this direct with strangers who help you? You always this evasive with women you rescue? Didn't rescue you, bought out a contract. Is that what you tell yourself? Lillian turned to face him fully, and Cole felt the weight of her attention like sun through a magnifying glass. You saw a woman in trouble and you helped. That's rescue, whether you want to call it that or not. Fine. Then yes, I rescued you. Happy? Not particularly. I don't like needing rescue. Didn't notice you turning it down. I'm practical, not proud. Brant Sykes would have dragged me back into that saloon and locked me in that room, and everyone in town would have pretended not to notice until I either gave in or found a way to escape myself. Her voice was matter of fact, but Cole heard the steel underneath. You gave me a third option. I'm grateful, even if I resent needing it. Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The wagon rolled on, wheels creaking, harness jingling. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. The prairie smelled like dust and dry grass and the coming evening. Can I ask you something? Lillian said after a while. Can I stop you? Probably not. Why did you do it? Really, you don't know me. $40 is a lot of money. And from what I saw in town, you're not exactly the type to insert yourself into other people's problems. Cole thought about lying, thought about giving her the easy answer about doing the right thing. But something about Lillian Hart made him want to tell the truth, even when the truth was complicated. I spent 8 years building a life where nothing could touch me, he said slowly, where I didn't have to care about anyone or anything except work and staying alive. It's a small life, but it's safe. And then you stumbled into the street with blood on your sleeve and fire in your eyes, and for about 10 seconds, I felt something I haven't felt since 1865. What was that? Like maybe safety isn't the same as living. The words hung between them, more honest than Cole had intended. He waited for her to laugh or pity him, or worse, try to fix him like all the well-meaning folks in Red Willow. Instead, Lillian Hart was quiet for a long moment before saying, "That's the saddest thing anyone's ever told me." Wasn't looking for sympathy. Good, I'm not offering any. She adjusted her skirts, brushing at a stain. But I understand it. That urge to make yourself small enough that life can't hurt you anymore. I left St. Louis for the same reason. Running from something? Running towards something, I thought. Fresh start, honest work, a place where my past didn't matter and my future was my own. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turned out I was just trading one cage for another. At least now I know what to watch for. What happened? In St. Louis, Lillian was quiet so long Cole thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I was engaged. To a man I thought I loved. He seemed kind, successful, owned a music hall, promised me we'd be partners in business and life. What went wrong? I found out he already had a wife and 2 children in Chicago, and a mistress in Memphis, and debts throughout the Mississippi Valley that he planned to settle by selling my family's property my father left in my name, trusting me to be smart enough not to marry a con artist. Cole let that settle. You were smart enough to figure it out. 2 days before the wedding, after I'd already burned every bridge in St. Louis society defending him. She stared out at the prairie, so I sold everything I could, bought a train ticket west, and answered the first advertisement for honest work I could find. Turns out, I'm not very good at spotting liars. Brant Sykes could fool anyone. But not you. I wasn't the one he was trying to fool. They crested a small rise and Nora's farm came into view. A weathered farmhouse surrounded by fields of wheat stubble, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, a windmill creaking in the breeze. 5 children played in the yard, their laughter carrying across the distance like birdsong. Lillian sat up straighter, studying the scene. Is it safe here? As safe as anywhere. Nora's tough as boot leather and twice as mean when it comes to protecting folks under her roof. She's got a shotgun older than Kansas and isn't shy about using it. Sounds like my kind of woman. The corner of Cole's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Yeah. Figured you two would get along. They pulled into the yard and children swarmed the wagon immediately, 5 of them ranging from about 6 to 13, all talking at once, all eyeing Lillian with undisguised curiosity. Did you really slap Brant Sykes? Is it true you're a piano player? Did Mr. Rourke really pay $40 for you? That's enough. Nora emerged from the house, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. Give the woman room to breathe. You're like a pack of wild dogs. The children fell back, though their eyes stayed bright with interest. Nora walked to the wagon, looking up at Lillian with a directness that matched her own. I'm Nora Beckett. Welcome to Chaos. Lillian Hart, thank you for having me. Cole says you need a safe place to stay and can play piano. That true? The piano playing is true. The safe place. I hope so. Brant Sykes bothers you here. He'll answer to me and my Winchester. We clear? Very clear. Good. Rent's $2 a week, includes meals and laundry. You'll help with harvest work, cooking, and teaching these hooligans their letters when I'm too tired to fight them. Sound fair? More than fair. Nora nodded, satisfied. Then welcome home, Lillian Hart. Let's get you settled. Lillian climbed down from the wagon, moving stiffly, and Cole realized she'd probably been traveling for days, running on fear and stubbornness. Nora saw it too, and immediately went into mother mode, ushering Lillian toward the house while dispatching children for water and clean towels. Cole sat on the wagon, watching them go, telling himself his job was done. He'd gotten her safe. Contract fulfilled, time to go back to his ranch and his carefully ordered solitude. But as Lillian reached the porch, she turned back. Thank you, Cole Rourke, for $40 in honesty. Wasn't honest. Just tired of lying. Same thing sometimes. She disappeared into the house with Nora, and Cole was left in the yard with 5 children staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Are you sweet on Miss Hart? The youngest asked. No? Then why are you still here? Good question. Cole gathered the reins, turned the wagon, and headed home as the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. He told himself he was done. Told himself he'd go back to his ranch and forget about Lillian Hart and her fierce eyes and honest words. He told himself a lot of things during that long ride home. None of them turned out to be true. 2 weeks passed like water over stone. Slow, steady, changing everything while seeming to change nothing. Cole didn't go back to Nora's farm. He told himself there was no reason to. The harvest was coming in, his own work piled high, and getting further involved with Lillian Hart's situation would only lead to complications he didn't need. But he heard things. Small-town gossip traveled faster than typhoid. Lillian had settled in at Nora's place. She was good with the children, better with the harvest work than anyone expected. She could play piano like an angel. They'd borrowed the church's upright for Sunday, and half the congregation had wept during her rendition of Amazing Grace. She hadn't gone back to town, hadn't tried to contact Brant Sykes, hadn't asked about Cole. That last detail shouldn't have mattered. It did. Cole buried himself in work. He mended the fence in the north pasture. He reshod all 4 horses. He rebuilt the chicken coop that hadn't needed rebuilding. He did everything except admit that he was avoiding the one place he wanted to be. Until the afternoon, Nora's oldest boy, Thomas, came thundering up on a plow horse, panic written across his 14-year-old face. Mr. Rourke, you gotta come. Brant Sykes is at the farm. Cole was unsteady before the words finished leaving Thomas's mouth. The ride to Nora's farm took 12 minutes at a full gallop. Cole counted every one of them, his mind spinning through possibilities, all of them bad. He arrived to find Brant's black carriage in the yard, his hired man, a thick-necked brute named Carlson, standing by the horses. Nora was on the porch, shotgun cradled in her arms, her 4 younger children clustered behind her. And in the yard, facing Brant Sykes like David facing Goliath, stood Lillian Hart. Cole dismounted while Steady was still moving, hitting the ground at a run that transitioned into a deliberately casual walk. Never let them see you hurry. Never let them know you care. Legal contract, Brant was saying, his voice carrying that same oily charm. Signed and witnessed. You can't just break it because you got cold feet, darling. I got cold feet because you misrepresented the terms. Lillian's voice was steady, but Cole could see the white-knuckled grip she had on her skirts. That's fraud, Mr. Sykes. That's your word against mine, and Judge Whitmore tends to favor clear documentation over hysterical claims. I'm not hysterical. You're a woman alone in the world making accusations against a respected businessman. What would you call it? Cole stepped into the space between them, not touching Lillian, but close enough that Brant would have to go through him to reach her. Afternoon, Brant. Brant's expression soured like milk. This doesn't concern you, Rourke. This is a legal matter between myself and my employee. She's not your employee. I bought out that contract 2 weeks ago. You bought out her debt. The contract itself remains binding. Brant pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. It says right here, 6 months employment. I'm willing to be reasonable. She can work it off at my establishment under proper terms. No funny business. What terms? Piano playing, evening performances, room and board provided. And if she refuses? Then I'll take it to Judge Whitmore. Breach of contract. I'm entitled to damages. Brant's smile was all teeth. Could be expensive for her. Could be expensive for anyone harboring her. He let that last part hang in the air, a threat aimed at Nora. Cole pulled the folded contract from Brant's hand before he could react, scanning the cramped handwriting. It was a standard employment agreement, 6 months, terms for room and board, performance of duties as assigned by the employer. The signature at the bottom was definitely Lillian's, flowing, confident script. This is a legal document, Cole said. That's what I've been trying to tell your lady friend. It's also vague as hell. Performance of duties as assigned could mean anything. No reasonable judge would enforce this. Judge Whitmore will enforce what I tell him to enforce. Brant's veneer of charm was cracking. Now stop playing lawyer and stay out of business that doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you show up at a friend's property making threats. Friend? I thought you didn't have friends, Rourke. Brant stepped closer, and Cole smelled whiskey and expensive cologne. Whole town knows you're the lonely cowboy who won't let anyone close. So what's different about this one? She special? Or are you just lonely enough now that even a con artist from St. Louis looks good? Behind him, Cole heard Lillian's sharp intake of breath. Brant had done his homework, dug into her past just to have ammunition. Walk away, Brant, Cole said quietly. Or what? You'll stop me? You and what army? Brant gestured at the farm, at Nora with her shotgun, at Lillian standing defiant in the dust. This isn't your fight. You're not the hero type. You're right, Cole agreed. I'm not. Then his fist connected with Brant's jaw. The bigger man staggered back, surprise more than pain on his face. Cole followed through with a left to the ribs, then stepped back, hands raised but not threatening, just ready. Brant touched his split lip, looked at the blood on his fingers like he couldn't quite believe it. You're going to regret that. Probably, but I'll regret it later. Brant's eyes went cold. This was the man under the charm, the one who'd built an empire by crushing anyone who challenged him. You just made an enemy you can't afford, Rourke. Add it to the list. For a moment, Cole thought Brant would charge. The bigger man's hands clenched, his breathing went heavy, violence coiling in his shoulders. But then he glanced at Nora's shotgun, at Carlson waiting by the carriage, at the children watching wide-eyed from the porch. This isn't over, Brant said. Not by a long shot. He climbed into his carriage, Carlson following, and they rolled out of the yard in a cloud of dust and broken pride. Silence settled over the farm like snow. Well, Nora said from the porch, that was dramatic. Cole's hands were shaking, adrenaline draining away, leaving him hollow. He'd just started a war he couldn't win. Brant Sykes owned half the county and all of its authority. One punch wouldn't end this. It would only make everything worse. He'd known that before his fist moved. He'd done it anyway. Are you insane? Lillian was in front of him now, her eyes blazing. Do you have any idea what you just did? Made things complicated. You made things impossible. Brant Sykes will destroy you now. He'll take your ranch, your reputation, everything you have. Maybe. Definitely. And for what? For me? A stranger who you don't know and who will be gone in 6 months anyway? Cole met her eyes, those fierce, intelligent eyes that had haunted his thoughts for 2 weeks. You're not a stranger anymore. The words landed between them like stones in water, rippling outward into implications neither of them was ready to examine. Lillian stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. You didn't have to do this. Yeah, I did. Why? The same question she'd asked 2 weeks ago. The same question that had 100 answers and only one truth. Because I'm tired, Cole said simply. Tired of watching bad things happen and telling myself it's not my problem. Tired of being safe. Tired of being alone. He looked at his hands, at the split knuckles already starting to swell. Maybe I didn't punch Brant for you. Maybe I punched him for me. Lillian stared at him for a long moment, and Cole couldn't read her expression. Anger, fear, something that might have been hope or might have been pity. Then she did something completely unexpected. She laughed, not hysterical laughter, not scared laughter, real, genuine amusement that lit up her whole face and made her look 10 years younger. You're insane, she said again, but this time it sounded almost like a compliment. Been told that before. And somehow I believe you. She shook her head, still smiling. What do we do now? We. Not you. We. Cole felt something shift in his chest, ice breaking up after a long winter. Now, he said, we figure out how to fight a war we can't win. Sounds impossible. Most good things are. From the porch, Nora called, You two planning to stand in the yard all night, or are you coming in for supper? Because I've got stew getting cold, and children who'll eat your shares if you don't hurry. Cole looked at Lillian. Lillian looked at Cole. And for the first time in 8 years, Cole Rourke smiled. Not a big smile, not the kind that reached his eyes or transformed his face, but a smile nonetheless. Supper sounds good, he said. They walked to the house together, and behind them, the sun set on Red Willow, Kansas, painting the sky the color of blood and gold, and promising storms ahead. The stew was venison and potatoes, thick enough to stand a spoon in, seasoned with herbs from Nora's garden, and the kind of care that came from feeding hungry mouths on limited means. Cole sat at the long wooden table surrounded by chaos, 5 children talking over each other, Nora refereeing disputes about who got the last biscuit, Lillian helping the youngest cut her meat with a patience that seemed infinite. It was the opposite of everything Cole's life had been for 8 years. It should have made him want to run. Instead, he found himself reaching for a second helping. Mr. Rourke punched Brant Sykes right in the mouth, 9-year-old Samuel announced to the table for the 3rd time, his eyes wide with admiration. Blood everywhere. Wasn't everywhere, Cole corrected. Was a split lip, that's all. Looked like everywhere to me. You've got an imagination, son. Ma says imagination's important for learning. Your ma's right about most things. Cole glanced at Nora, who was watching him with that knowing expression that made him feel transparent as window glass. Lillian had been quiet through most of the meal, responding to the children's questions with half her attention, while the other half seemed focused on something far away. Now she set down her fork and looked directly at Cole. We need to talk about what happens next. Can it wait until after dessert? Nora asked. I made apple cobbler, and these vultures will eat the whole thing if we don't establish portions. There's dessert? Samuel perked up. There's always dessert if you eat your vegetables. I ate 3 carrots. 2 carrots, and you hid one under your napkin. Try again. While Nora orchestrated the complex negotiations of dessert distribution, Cole felt Lillian's eyes still on him. He met her gaze and saw the worry there, the calculation, the burden of knowing that his impulsive punch had tied their fates together, whether either of them wanted it or not. After supper, while Nora got the children ready for bed and the house filled with the sounds of protests about toothbrushing and prayers, Cole and Lillian found themselves on the porch. The night had come in cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like salt spilled on black velvet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. Lillian wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and leaned against the porch railing. You didn't have to hit him. We covered this already. I know. I'm still trying to understand why you did. Cole thought about the question, really thought about it. The easy answer was that Brant had threatened someone under Nora's protection. The true answer was more complicated, tangled up with 8 years of careful isolation and the strange feeling that had been growing in his chest since the moment Lillian Hart stumbled into his life. When I came back from the war, he said slowly, I made a deal with myself. No attachments, no risks, nothing that could hurt worse than what I'd already survived. He stared out at the dark prairie. Worked fine until it didn't. And when did it stop working? About 2 weeks ago, Main Street, torn dress, valise clutched like a lifeline. Lillian was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I didn't ask to be your catalyst for change, Cole Rourke. Didn't ask to be mine either, but here we are. Here we are, she echoed, with Brant Sykes planning revenge and no clear way forward. Could leave, Cole suggested. Take the train west, California, Oregon, plenty of places to disappear. Is that what you want me to do? The question hung between them like smoke. Cole knew the smart answer, the safe answer, the one that would let him return to his carefully controlled life before complications destroyed it completely. No, he heard himself say, that's not what I want. Then what do you want? I want you to stay. I want to figure out how to fight Brant without losing everything. I want... He stopped, surprised by how close he'd come to saying something true and terrifying. I want to stop pretending that being alone is the same as being safe. Lillian turned to face him fully, and in the lamplight spilling from the house, Cole could see the weariness in her face, the marks of too many battles fought with too little support. But he could also see something else, a flicker of hope, fragile as a candle flame. I'm tired of running, she said. I ran from St. Louis, ran from my mistakes, ran from a man who lied to me and a society that blamed me for believing him. I thought coming west would be a fresh start, but it was just more running. She pulled the shawl tighter. Maybe it's time to stand still. Standing still against Brant Sykes is dangerous. So is everything else worth doing? Before Cole could respond, the door opened and Nora emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Children are finally down. Thomas is reading to the little ones, which buys us maybe 20 minutes before someone needs water or has a nightmare. She looked between Cole and Lillian, reading the air between them. You two figure anything out? We're staying, Lillian said. We're fighting. We? Nora raised an eyebrow at Cole. Apparently. Well, then you'd better have a plan, because Brant Sykes doesn't make idle threats. He'll come at you legal first, tie you up in court, drain your money. When that doesn't work fast enough, he'll come at you sideways. Accidents, property damage, making life difficult until you give up or give in. Sounds like you've seen this before, Cole said. My second husband crossed Brant over a land deal. Took us 3 years to settle it, cost us half the farm, and the only reason we survived at all was because Jeremiah died before Brant could finish destroying him. Nora's voice was matter-of-fact, but Cole heard the old pain underneath. Man's got patience and resources. Bad combination. So what do we do? Lillian asked. First thing, make sure that contract isn't enforceable. Second thing, make it too expensive for Brant to keep fighting. Third thing, Nora smiled, sharp as broken glass. Make him sorry he ever started. Cole felt something kindle in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. You've been thinking about this. Been thinking about how to hurt Brant Sykes for 3 years. Just never had the right opportunity. Nora's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. Maybe you two are it. They talked strategy until the stars wheeled overhead and the coyotes went quiet. Nora knew which farmers resented Brant's land grabs, which merchants chafed under his monopolies, which families had been damaged by his casual cruelty. Red Willow might look like Brantstown, but underneath the surface, resentment simmered. Problem is getting people to act, Nora said. Everyone's scared. Brant's got too much power, too many friends in high places. Then we need to make him look weak, Lillian suggested. Show people he can be stood up to. How? He just survived having you walk away from his contract. Barely. And only because Cole paid him off and then punched him in front of witnesses. Lillian leaned forward, animated now, her strategic mind visibly working. That's 2 losses in 2 weeks. Public losses. If we can keep that momentum going, he'll come down twice as hard, Cole finished. Probably. But he'll also make mistakes. Angry men always do. Cole studied her. This woman who'd stumbled into his life with nothing but a valise and determination, who'd been lied to and trapped, and was still plotting strategy instead of surrender. Something in his chest tightened, not painfully, but like a muscle remembering how to work after long disuse. You're not afraid of him, he said. Oh, I'm terrified. I'm just more tired of being afraid than I am scared of fighting back. Lillian met his eyes. You understand that, don't you? He did. Better than she knew. They kept planning until Nora finally shooed them both towards sleep, Lillian to the small room she shared with the two youngest girls, Cole to the barn loft where he'd slept during harvest seasons past. He lay in the hay listening to the horses shift in their stalls below, staring at ceiling beams he could barely see in the darkness. Tomorrow, he'd ride back to his ranch. Tomorrow, he'd start preparing for whatever Brant threw at them. Tomorrow, he'd have to face the fact that he'd just traded 8 years of careful solitude for a war he might not win. But tonight, for the first time since he could remember, Cole Rourke wasn't alone. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt almost like peace. The next 2 weeks moved like a river gathering speed before rapids, deceptively calm on the surface while currents pulled everything toward inevitable collision. Cole returned to his ranch to find his fence posts torn down along the eastern boundary and 20 head of cattle missing. No sign of them on his land. No evidence of who'd taken them, just missing, like they'd evaporated into prairie air. He reported it to Sheriff Drummond, who wrote it down with all the enthusiasm of a man filling out tax forms and promised to look into it with the same tone people used when they had no intention of doing anything at all. Probably just wandered off, Drummond suggested, not meeting Cole's eyes. Cattle do that. Through intact fence? Fence looks torn up to me. Maintenance issue, maybe. That fence was fine yesterday. Well, can't hardly charge a man for poor fence maintenance, can I? Drummond closed his notebook with the finality of a door slamming. I'll keep an eye out for your stock. Sure they'll turn up. They wouldn't. Cole knew it. Drummond knew it. Everyone in Red Willow knew it, and nobody would say a word because saying words against Brant Sykes was bad for business and worse for health. Cole rode back to his ranch and rebuilt the fence, working from dawn until dark, his hands blistering and his mind churning. This was just the beginning. Brant was making a point. I can hurt you, and nobody will stop me. The message was received. 2 days later, someone poisoned his well. Cole found his horse steady, sick and retching, foam at his mouth, eyes rolling. He spent 6 hours nursing the animal back from the edge while rage built in his chest like a thunderstorm. Easy, boy, he whispered, stroking Steady's neck while the horse trembled. You're all right. You're all right. The horse survived. The well didn't. Cole spent the next day hauling water from the creek and planning how to dig a new well he couldn't afford. He didn't go to the sheriff. No point in performing a play when everyone knew the ending. Instead, he rode to Nora's farm. He found Lillian in the field, her skirts hiked up and tucked into her waistband, helping with the late harvest. She moved down the rows with quick efficiency, her hands already toughened from work, her face flushed from sun and effort. When she saw him approach, she straightened, shading her eyes. You look terrible, she said. Feel worse. Got a minute? They walked to the edge of the field, out of earshot from the children playing near the barn. Cole told her about the cattle, the fence, the well. With each detail, Lillian's expression grew harder. He's trying to break you financially, she said when he finished. Force you to sell at a loss or abandon the ranch entirely. Yeah, I figured. What are you going to do? Cole looked at her, really looked. Lillian Hart had been in Red Willow for 3 weeks and had already transformed. The desperate woman who'd fled Brant's saloon had been replaced by someone stronger, surer, forged by work and community into something that could bend without breaking. She reminded him of himself before the war, before loss had taught him that caring was dangerous. I'm going to fight back, he said. How? Haven't figured that part out yet. Lillian smiled quick and fierce. Good thing you've got help, then. That evening, sitting around Nora's table with coffee and determination, they planned their counterstrike. It wasn't much. Brant had money, power, connections. They had stubbornness and a growing network of people who'd been hurt by his greed. Jacob Miller still owes Brant money on his land, Nora said. Been paying it off for 5 years, but the interest keeps growing. Man's working himself to death and getting nowhere. How much does he owe? Cole asked. Last I heard, around $300. Cole winced. That was a fortune. More than he could spare, especially with missing cattle and a poisoned well. What if we helped him? Lillian suggested. Not pay it off, that would just transfer the debt. But what if we found a way to challenge the terms? Show that Brant's been charging illegal interest. You'd need proof, Nora said, and a lawyer willing to go against Brant. Good luck finding that in Red Willow. What about Dodge City? Cole suggested. Bigger town, more lawyers, harder for Brant to control them all. Still need proof. Then we get proof. Lillian's eyes gleamed with the same determination Cole had seen when she'd slapped Brant in the street. Brant's got to keep records, contracts, payment schedules. They'd be in his office, probably. His office is above the saloon, Nora pointed out. Locked, guarded at night. So we don't go at night. They stared at her. You're suggesting we break into Brant Sykes' office in broad daylight? Cole asked. I'm suggesting someone with a legitimate reason to be there creates a distraction while someone else looks around. Lillian leaned forward. He doesn't know I'm working with you. As far as Brant knows, I'm just hiding at Nora's farm waiting for the contract situation to blow over. What if I went to him, offered to negotiate? Absolutely not. The words came out harder than Cole intended. Why not? Because it's dangerous. Because Brant's got no reason to negotiate. Because Cole stopped, aware that Nora was watching him with knowing eyes. Because it's a bad plan. It's the only plan we've got. Then we'll think of another one. Will we? How many more wells can you afford to have poisoned, Cole? How many more fences can you rebuild? Lillian's voice was gentle but unyielding. We don't have time to be careful. Brant's moving fast. We need to move faster. She was right. Cole hated that she was right. If something happens to you, it won't. You don't know that. No, but I know that doing nothing is worse. Lillian reached across the table and touched his hand, brief and electric. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can help or not. Cole looked at that hand on his. Small, work-roughened, capable. Looked at Lillian's face, set with determination that matched his own. Looked at Nora, who was trying very hard not to smile. If we're doing this, he said slowly, we do it right. No improvising. No taking risks we haven't planned for. Agreed. And I'm coming with you. That defeats the purpose of, I'm coming with you, Cole repeated, or we're not doing it at all. Lillian studied him for a long moment, and Cole saw her weighing options, calculating risks, deciding how far to push. Finally, she nodded. Fine, but you follow my lead. We'll see. Nora actually laughed at that. You two are going to drive each other completely insane. Probably, Lillian agreed. Looking forward to it, Cole added. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Cole made discreet inquiries about Brant's schedule, learning that he spent every Wednesday afternoon at the lumber mill, reviewing accounts and terrorizing workers. That gave them a window. Small, dangerous, but real. Lillian practiced her approach, running through different angles and arguments until she could deliver them with the perfect mixture of desperation and calculation. She'd play the role Brant expected, defeated woman, ready to negotiate surrender. You're good at this, Cole observed after watching her rehearse. I was engaged to a con artist. You pick things up. You're better than he was. I'd hope so. I learned from his mistakes. The night before they planned to execute their scheme, Cole couldn't sleep. He sat on Nora's porch long after everyone else had gone to bed, watching clouds scud across the face of the moon, thinking about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. The door opened quietly behind him. Lillian. Can't sleep either? She asked, thinking. Anything useful? Depends on your definition of useful. Cole shifted to make room for her on the steps. Mostly thinking this is the stupidest thing I've done since the war. That's encouraging. And that if something happens to you tomorrow, I'll... He stopped, surprised by the intensity of the feeling. I won't forgive myself. Lillian sat beside him, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap Nora made. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. I know enough. Like what? Cole thought about it. I know you're brave. Know you're honest. Know you slap men who deserve it and play piano like you're talking to something bigger than yourself. Know you came west looking for a fresh start and got trapped instead. And instead of giving up, you're planning to break into the office of the most dangerous man in 3 counties. He glanced at her. That enough? It's something. Lillian was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? Can I stop you? She smiled at that. When I first saw you, in the street, stepping between me and Brant, you know what I thought? That I was insane? That you looked dead, like you were walking around, functioning, doing all the things living people do, but not actually alive inside. She met his eyes. You don't look dead anymore. The words hit Cole like a physical blow, true and terrifying. Lillian, I'm not finished. I also thought you were kind. Underneath all that protective silence and careful distance, there was kindness. Real kindness. Not the performative type. The kind that costs something. She touched his arm, light as falling snow. That's worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. Cole didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that he'd spent 8 years building walls specifically to prevent this moment, this feeling of connection, of mattering to someone, of being seen. I'm not good at this, he said finally. At what? Caring, letting people in. I'm rusty. Then it's good we're practicing on something low stakes like breaking and entering. Her tone was light, but her eyes were serious. Cole, I'm scared too. Scared of Brant. Scared of failing. Scared of caring about someone new when the last person I trusted turned out to be a liar. She squeezed his arm gently. But I'm more scared of being alone again. Of running away from the one place I found people worth staying for. Worth staying for, Cole repeated. That include me? What do you think? He thought about the question honestly. Thought about Lillian teaching Nora's children their letters, her patient hands guiding small fingers across borrowed books. Thought about her in the fields, working until sunset without complaint. Thought about her voice when she talked strategy, fierce and smart and uncompromising. Thought about how his ranch had felt empty in a way it never had before. Now that he knew what Nora's kitchen sounded like, filled with laughter and argument and life. I think, he said slowly, that I'd like you to stay. If you want to. I want to. They sat together in companionable silence, watching the night sky, both thinking about tomorrow and all the ways it could change everything. Somewhere in the distance, the coyotes started their evening song. Closer, in the barn, a horse whinnied softly. Cole? Lillian's voice was quiet. Yeah? Tomorrow, if things go wrong, they won't. But if they do, I want you to know that these last few weeks have been the most alive I've felt in years. Coming west, meeting you, finding Nora and the children, fighting back against Brant instead of just running. It's been terrifying and exhausting and worth every minute. Cole felt something crack in his chest, ice breaking up after a long winter. For what it's worth, he said. Same. Lillian leaned her head against his shoulder, and Cole froze for a moment before relaxing into it. They sat like that until the moon set and the stars wheeled overhead, two people who'd spent too long alone learning what it felt like to be found. Wednesday afternoon arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies, the kind of weather that made farmers grateful and Cole nervous. He preferred storms. Storms gave you something to watch, something to prepare for. This felt too easy. He met Lillian on the road to town, both of them dressed carefully. Her in the nicest dress she owned, borrowed from Nora's limited collection, him in his one good shirt and cleanest trousers. They looked like what they were pretending to be, a woman ready to negotiate and her reluctant escort. Remember, Lillian said as Red Willow came into view, I do the talking, you just look intimidating. I'm not intimidating. Cole, you have resting war veteran face. You're plenty intimidating. They hitched the wagon outside the saloon. It was 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, quiet time, between the lunch crowd and evening drinkers. Perfect timing, if their intelligence was correct. Brant's office was on the second floor, accessed by an external staircase. Cole had been in it once, years ago, settling a cattle sale. He remembered dark wood, expensive furniture, filing cabinets that probably held enough evidence to hang Brant twice over if anyone had the courage to look. The bartender, a thin man named Wesley who'd always struck Cole as more scared than mean, looked up when they entered. Help you folks? We're here to see Mr. Sykes, Lillian said, her voice pitched perfectly between respectful and resigned. He's at the mill. Then we'll wait in his office. He'll want to see me when he returns. Wesley hesitated, torn between following orders and self-preservation. Don't know if that's... Tell him Lillian Hart is here to discuss contract terms. Tell him I'm ready to negotiate." She smiled, brittle and bright. "He'll want to know." Wesley looked at Cole, who arranged his face into something that suggested extreme disinterest in what the bartender decided, while simultaneously implying that the wrong decision would be unfortunate for everyone involved. "Fine," Wesley said finally. "Upstairs. But you wait in the hall until he gets here." "Of course." They climbed the external stairs, their footsteps echoing on wood. The hallway was narrow, dim, smelling of cigar smoke and old wood. Brant's office door was closed, but unlocked, arrogance more than carelessness. Who would dare snoop in Brant Sykes' private space? They were about to find out. Lillian tried the handle. It turned smoothly. She glanced at Cole, took a breath, and pushed the door open. The office was exactly as Cole remembered. Oversized desk, leather chairs, filing cabinets lining one wall, a safe in the corner that probably held more than cash. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes, and the casual wealth of a man who'd built his empire on other people's desperation. 10 minutes, Cole said quietly. That's all we have. Lillian was already moving to the filing cabinets. You take that side, I'll take this one. Look for contracts, loan agreements, anything with multiple signatures. Cole pulled open the first drawer. It was meticulously organized, alphabetically by last name, each file precisely labeled. Say what you wanted about Brant Sykes. The man kept good records. Maybe too good. Cole's hands moved through the files, pulling anything that looked relevant. Miller, Jacob. There it was. A contract for land purchase with payment terms that made Cole's blood boil. 15% interest, compounding monthly. That was usury, plain and simple, and illegal in Kansas. Got Miller's file, he said. Good. Keep looking. He found 3 more files in quick succession, families he recognized, all trapped in similar contracts, all being slowly crushed by terms designed to keep them in debt forever. Brant wasn't just greedy. He was systematic about it. Cole, Lillian's voice was tight. You need to see this. He crossed to her side. She'd pulled a ledger from the bottom drawer, leather-bound, expensive, filled with neat columns of numbers. What is it? Income records, from the saloon and other properties. She pointed to a section. Look at these entries. They're marked special services and entertainment contracts. These are women, Cole. Women he's been bringing in with fake job offers, then trapping in contracts like mine. Cole felt rage build in his chest, cold and focused. How many? At least 20 over the past 2 years, some marked as departed, which probably means they escaped, or... She didn't finish the sentence. We're taking this. It's evidence of criminal activity. Taking it makes us thieves. Then we're thieves. We can live with that. Lillian nodded, slipping the ledger under her shawl. Cole grabbed the most damning contracts, folding them into his coat. They were just turning to leave when they heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy footsteps. Deliberate footsteps. Brant's footsteps. Cole and Lillian locked eyes. They'd planned for this possibility, but planning and experiencing were 2 different things. His mind raced through options, hide in the office and hope Brant didn't check, run and risk exposure, fight and guarantee disaster. Lillian Hart, Brant's voice boomed from the hallway. Wesley said you wanted to negotiate. I'm a reasonable man. Let's talk. The door handle started to turn. Cole grabbed Lillian's hand and pulled her toward the window. It overlooked the back alley, a 12-foot drop to hard-packed dirt. Not ideal, but better than explaining why they were rifling through his files. Trust me? Cole whispered. Do I have a choice? Not really. He pushed the window open as quietly as possible, threw his legs over the sill, and dropped. The impact jarred through his knees, but he stayed upright, looking up at Lillian. Your turn. She hiked up her skirts, climbed onto the sill with surprising grace, and jumped. Cole caught her, the momentum knocking them both back a step, and for a moment they stood there in the alley, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her eyes, feel her heart pounding against his chest. That was insane, she whispered. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Above them, they heard Brant's voice rising in anger as he discovered his empty office and open window. We need to move, Cole said. They ran. They didn't stop running until they reached the wagon, and even then Cole's hand shook as he unhitched the horses with speed born of necessity rather than grace. Behind them, he could hear Brant's voice bellowing from the second-floor window, calling for Wesley, for Carlson, for anyone who could chase down two thieves stupid enough to rob him in broad daylight. "Go, go!" Lillian hissed, scrambling onto the wagon seat. Cole snapped the reins and the horses lunged forward, their hooves throwing up clouds of dust as they bolted down Main Street. People scattered, Mrs. Hutchins with her shopping basket, the blacksmith's apprentice carrying an anvil, a dog that barked furiously at their passing. Cole kept his eyes forward, navigating the rutted street with single-minded focus, while Lillian clutched the documents to her chest like they were made of solid gold. They were worth more than gold. They were proof. The edge of town blurred past, and suddenly they were on open prairie, the horses settling into a hard gallop that ate up distance. Cole risked a glance back. No pursuit yet, but it would come. Brant Sykes didn't forgive theft, and he especially wouldn't forgive being made a fool of twice in 1 month. "Did we really just do that?" Lillian asked, her voice pitched high with adrenaline and something that might have been laughter or might have been hysteria. "Appears so. We jumped out a window. Seemed preferable to the alternative. We stole evidence from the most dangerous man in 3 counties. You wanted to move faster than him. Congratulations." Cole eased the horses back to a sustainable pace, his heart still hammering. "How you feeling?" "Alive." Lillian turned to him, her eyes bright with triumph and terror in equal measure. Terrified and exhilarated and completely alive. She laughed, and this time it was definitely laughter, wild and unrestrained. "We did it, Cole. We actually did it. We got evidence. That's step 1. Still got to figure out what to do with it. We take it to a lawyer in Dodge City, just like we planned. Show them Brant's been operating an illegal loan scheme and trafficking women under false pretenses. Get injunctions against the contracts, maybe even criminal charges." It sounded good when she said it. Clean, simple. The kind of plan that worked in a world where justice mattered more than money and connections. Cole had stopped believing in that world around the same time he'd watched his best friend die in a Tennessee field. But he didn't say that. Instead he said, "We'll head to Nora's first. Make copies of everything in case something happens to the originals. Then I'll ride to Dodge tomorrow." "We'll ride to Dodge." "Lillian, we. I'm not staying behind while you take all the risk. Those documents are as much mine as yours. More, actually. My name's probably in that ledger somewhere." Cole wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she stay safe at Nora's farm while he handled the dangerous part. Wanted to protect her the way he'd failed to protect everyone else he'd cared about. But Lillian Hart wasn't asking for protection. She was demanding partnership. "Fine," he said. "We go together." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." They rode in silence for a while, the prairie stretching endlessly around them, grassland and sky meeting at a horizon that seemed impossibly far away. The sun was starting its descent, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. It would have been beautiful if Cole's mind hadn't been racing through everything that could still go wrong. Nora's farm appeared ahead, the windmill visible first, then the barn, then the house with smoke rising from the chimney. The children were playing in the yard, some kind of elaborate game involving sticks and imagination, and their laughter carried across the distance like bells. They'd barely stopped the wagon when Nora emerged from the house, her face tight with worry. "You're back early. Something go wrong?" "Define wrong," Cole said, climbing down. "We got what we came for," Lillian added, showing the documents. "But Brant knows someone was in his office. He'll figure out it was us soon enough." Nora's expression shifted from worried to calculating. "Then we don't have much time. Inside, both of you. Children, keep playing. Thomas, keep an eye on the road." Inside the house, they spread the documents across Nora's kitchen table. Contracts, loan agreements, the damning ledger with its neat columns of exploitation. Nora read through them with the focus of a woman who'd learned to spot danger in fine print, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is worse than I thought," she said finally. "The contracts are bad enough, but this ledger, if this became public knowledge, Brant wouldn't just lose his business. He'd hang. Which is exactly why he'll do anything to get it back," Cole said, "or destroy anyone who's seen it." Nora looked up, her eyes sharp. "You two just painted targets on your backs. You know that, right?" "We know." Lillian said quietly. "And you're still planning to take this to Dodge City? To a lawyer who'll probably be in Brant's pocket anyway. Not all of them can be bought. You'd be surprised." Nora drummed her fingers on the table, thinking. "But you're right that we need legal help. Question is whether we can get it before Brant shuts this down permanently." Cole was about to respond when Thomas burst through the door, his face flushed from running. "Ma, riders coming. 4 of them moving fast." Everyone moved at once. Nora grabbed the documents, shoving them into a flour sack. "Cole, take these to the root cellar. Lillian, help me with the children. Thomas, get the shotgun." Cole took the sack and ran, his boots pounding across the packed earth floor to the small door that led to the root cellar. He descended quickly, shoving the sack behind a barrel of preserves, covering it with old burlap. Not a perfect hiding place, but it would have to do. When he emerged, the riders were already in the yard. Brant Sykes sat on a black horse that matched his mood, flanked by Carlson and 2 other men Cole recognized as ranch hands from Brant's property. All 4 were armed. All 4 looked ready to use those weapons. Nora stood on her porch, shotgun cradled in her arms, with the casual competence of someone who knew exactly how to use it. The children clustered behind her, their earlier laughter replaced by tense silence. Lillian stood to the side, her face composed but her hands clenched in her skirts. Cole walked out to meet them, deliberately placing himself between the riders and the house. "Afternoon, Brant." "Rourke." Brant's voice was cold enough to freeze water. "Interesting thing happened today. Someone broke into my office, stole private property. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "Can't say that I do." "Funny. Because my bartender saw you and Miss Hart enter the saloon, saw you go upstairs. And about 10 minutes later, I found my office window open and several important documents missing. Sounds like you've got a security problem." "I've got a thief problem." Brant's hand rested on his pistol. "And I'm here to solve it." The air went tight, that suspended moment before violence, when everything balanced on a razor's edge. Cole felt the old war instincts kick in, calculating distances, angles. Who would draw first and where the shots would go? 4 against 1, maybe 2 if Nora decided to get involved. Bad odds. The kind of odds that got people killed. Behind him, he heard the distinctive click of Nora cocking her shotgun. "You're on my property, Brant," she called out. "Uninvited and unwelcome. That gives me legal right to defend it." "I'm pursuing stolen property, Nora. That gives me legal right to search." "You got a warrant?" "Don't need a warrant when the criminals are standing right in front of me." "Actually, you do. It's called the 4th Amendment. Maybe you've heard of it?" Nora's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Now you can ride out peaceful, or you can explain to Sheriff Drummond why you got buckshot in your backside trying to illegally search a widow's home." Brant's face darkened. "Drummond works for me. Drummond's your cousin, which means he'll look the other way when you're doing harm to others. But even he can't ignore me shooting you in self-defense on my own land. Not with 4 witnesses." She gestured to the children. "So what's it going to be?" The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Cole watched Brant's face, saw the calculation there, the weighing of options and consequences. Brant was cruel, but he wasn't stupid. Starting a shooting war with witnesses would raise questions even he couldn't silence. Finally, Brant raised a hand, signaling his men to stand down. "This isn't over, Rourke. You and your lady friend stole from me. That's a crime. A real crime, not like those trumped-up charges you're probably planning to bring against me." "Don't know what you're talking about," Cole said evenly. "Yes, you do. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to return my property, all of it, by sundown tomorrow. You're going to forget whatever nonsense you think you found in those documents, and Miss Hart is going to honor her contract by returning to my employment." "No." Lillian's voice cut through the tension, clear and unwavering. She stepped forward, moving to stand beside Cole. "I will never work for you. I will never honor a contract obtained through fraud. And if you think Cole and I are going to surrender evidence of your crimes, you're even more delusional than I thought." Brant's smile was ugly. "Brave words, darling. Let's see how brave you feel when the sheriff arrests you both for theft. When your names are destroyed and no one in 3 counties will give you work or shelter. When you lose everything trying to fight a battle you can't win." "Maybe we'll lose," Lillian agreed, "but at least we'll lose standing up instead of kneeling down." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Cole felt a surge of pride so strong it almost hurt. This woman who'd come west looking for safety had found courage instead, and she was wielding it like a weapon. Brant's expression twisted with rage and something else, maybe respect, maybe just frustration that his usual tactics weren't working. "You're making a mistake." "Then it's our mistake to make," Cole said. Brant jerked his reins, his horse dancing backward. "Sundown tomorrow. That's your deadline. After that, I stop playing nice." He wheeled his horse and galloped off, his men following, leaving a cloud of dust and implied threats hanging over the farm. The silence they left behind felt fragile, like glass that might shatter at a wrong word. Nora lowered the shotgun carefully, releasing the hammer. "Well, that could have gone worse." "Could have gone better too," Cole said. "What do we do now?" Thomas asked from the porch, his voice trying for brave and landing somewhere around scared. Good question. They had maybe 24 hours before Brant made good on his threats. 24 hours to get evidence to Dodge City, find a lawyer, and somehow convince the legal system to act faster than Brant could shut them down. 24 hours to win a war against impossible odds. "Now," Cole said, looking at Lillian, "we go on the offensive." That night they worked by lamplight, Nora's kitchen transformed into a war room. They made copies of the most damning documents using Nora's precious carbon paper, storing the originals in 3 different locations, some buried in the root cellar, some hidden in the barn loft, some tucked into a hollowed-out book on Nora's shelf. If Brant came back with a search warrant, he wouldn't find everything. Lillian worked with fierce concentration, her handwriting neat despite exhaustion, documenting every name in the ledger, every fraudulent contract, every piece of evidence they'd stolen. Cole found himself watching her when he should have been working, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the determined set of her jaw that said she'd see this through even if it killed her. It might kill her. Might kill them both. "What are you thinking?" she asked without looking up. "That you're remarkable." Lillian's hand stilled. She looked up, meeting his eyes across the table. "That's not what you were thinking." "It's part of it." "What's the other part?" Cole set down his pen. "The part where I wonder if I'm getting you killed by letting you stay in this fight. The part where I think I should put you on a train west and handle this myself. The part where—" "Stop." Lillian's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not a thing to be protected, Cole. I'm a person making a choice, my choice, and I choose to fight. Even if it costs you everything? Everything costs everything eventually. At least this way I get to decide what I'm paying for." Nora, working at the other end of the table, made a small sound that might have been approval or might have been amusement. "She's got you there, Cole." "She usually does." They worked until midnight, until the copies were complete and hidden, and they'd made plans for the morning. Cole would ride to Dodge City at first light, find the one lawyer Nora thought might be honest, a man named Howard Chen, who'd come west from California and hadn't been in Kansas long enough for Brant to buy him yet. Lillian would stay at the farm with the documents, ready to run if Brant came back. Cole hated the plan, hated leaving her vulnerable, hated that the smart tactical move was to separate their forces. "I'll be fine," Lillian insisted as they stood on the porch, the night air cool against their skin. "Nora's got the shotgun. Thomas knows how to ride for help. And I'm not helpless." "Never said you were?" "You thought it loud enough." Cole smiled despite himself. "You're not guarded anymore. You're direct. Learned it from someone." She stepped closer, close enough that Cole could see the lamplight reflected in her eyes. "Promise me something." "Depends what it is." "Promise me you'll come back, not for the fight or the evidence or any noble reason, just because you want to." The words hit Cole square in the chest, honest and vulnerable in a way that made his carefully constructed walls seem fragile as spider silk. He'd spent 8 years convincing himself that wanting things was dangerous, that caring led to loss, that the only safe path was the one walked alone. But standing there with Lillian Hart looking at him like he mattered, like his presence in her life was something worth fighting for, Cole realized that safety had become its own kind of prison. "I promise," he said. Lillian's smile was soft, transforming her whole face. "Good." Because I'm tired of people leaving. Me too. They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged with all the things they hadn't said, all the feelings growing in the cracks of their carefully protected hearts. Cole wondered if she felt it too, this pull, this recognition, this sense that they were building something real out of chaos, and stolen documents, and shared courage. He was about to say something, what he didn't know, when the first snowflake fell. Then another. Within minutes, the air was thick with falling snow, fat flakes that caught the lamplight and turned the world into something otherworldly. November in Kansas could be unpredictable, but this was early even for the plains. This was the kind of storm that came in fast and brutal and changed everything. "That's not good," Lillian murmured. "No, it's not." They watched the snow fall, both understanding what it meant. The road to Dodge City would be impassable by morning. The farm would be cut off, and whatever window they'd had for getting evidence to a lawyer had just slammed shut. Inside, Nora appeared at the door. "Children are asking questions about the snow. I told them it's an adventure, but Thomas knows better. He's scared." Cole turned to face her. "How bad will it get?" "Hard to say. Could blow over by morning. Could be 3 days." Nora's expression was grim. "Either way, we're stuck here. And if Brant decides to come back with that warrant..." "We'll handle it," Lillian said. "How?" Good question. Cole's mind raced through options, all of them bad. They couldn't run in a blizzard, couldn't fight Brant's men if they came in force, couldn't even send for help with the roads disappearing under snow. They were trapped. "We fortify," he said finally. "Board up what we can, keep the shotgun loaded, take shifts watching the road. And if they come anyway? Then we make them wish they hadn't." The storm hit full force around midnight, wind howling like wounded animals, and snow falling so thick Cole couldn't see the barn from the house. They'd brought the animals in close, secured everything that could blow away, and turned the farmhouse into a small fortress. Now Cole stood at the window, watching the white chaos outside, thinking about time and choices and the strange path that had led him from careful isolation to standing guard over people he'd somehow started to care about. Behind him, the children slept in a pile near the fireplace, exhausted from the drama of the day. Nora dozed in her rocking chair, the shotgun across her lap, looking like every pioneer woman who'd ever held a line against wilderness and worse. And Lillian sat at the table, still working by lamplight, documenting every detail they might need for a legal case that seemed increasingly impossible. "You should sleep," Cole said quietly. "So should you. Someone needs to keep watch." "Then we'll take turns." Lillian set down her pen, stretching her neck. "Come sit with me for a minute. The storm's not going anywhere." Cole crossed to the table, lowering himself into the chair across from her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in the shadows under her eyes, the ink stains on her fingers, the determined set of her mouth that said she'd work until she collapsed if no one stopped her. "You're not guarded," he said. "You're stubborn. Takes one to know one." "Fair point." Lillian smiled, then grew serious. "Can I ask you something personal? Can I stop you?" "Probably not. What happened to you? In the war, I mean. You don't have to answer if..." "Shiloh," Cole said, surprised by his own willingness to speak. "Tennessee. April 1862. Bloodiest 2 days I ever saw. Lost my best friend there, Tommy Chen. He was 23 years old, engaged to a girl back home, had his whole life planned out." "What happened?" "Cannonball. Quick," they said. Like that made it better. I held him while he died, and you know what his last words were? "Tell Susan I'm sorry." Not that he loved her. Not goodbye. Just sorry, like dying was something he'd chosen to do instead of something that happened to him. Cole stopped, surprised by the tightness in his throat. He hadn't talked about Tommy in years. Hadn't let himself think about that blood-soaked field and the weight of a dying man in his arms. "Did you tell her?" Lillian asked softly. "Susan?" "Wrote her a letter. Never got a response. Heard later she'd married someone else 3 months after we shipped out. Whole time Tommy was fighting for the future they'd planned. She was building a different one. That must have hurt. Everything hurt back then. Tommy's death, Susan's betrayal of his memory, coming home to find my father had died while I was gone, the ranch falling apart, everyone I knew changed by war or grief or time." Cole met Lillian's eyes. "I decided right then that caring was a luxury I couldn't afford. Easier to just shut down. Safer. But not better. No, not better. They sat in silence for a moment, the wind rattling the windows, the fire crackling in the hearth. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something quieter but no less powerful was building between them. "Can I tell you something?" Lillian said. "Always. When I first came west, I thought I was running away, escaping my mistakes, my humiliation, the life I'd ruined by trusting the wrong man. But sitting here, in this farmhouse, with you and Nora and these children, fighting Brant Sykes and stealing evidence and jumping out windows, I realized I wasn't running away from anything. I was running toward this, toward people worth fighting for, toward a life that costs something but means everything." Cole felt those words settle in his chest like seeds in soil, ready to grow into something he couldn't yet name. "You're not afraid?" he asked. "Terrified. But fear and worth aren't mutually exclusive." Lillian reached across the table, her hand covering his. "You taught me that, you know. Standing up to Brant even when it cost you, helping me even when every instinct told you not to get involved, being brave even though you're scared. I'm not brave." "Yes, you are. You're just brave in the quiet way. The kind that doesn't announce itself." Her fingers tightened on his. "The kind that shows up anyway." Before Cole could respond, a sound cut through the storm, a sharp crack, then another. Not thunder, not wind, gunshots. Everyone moved at once. Nora was on her feet, shotgun raised. The children woke crying. Thomas ran to the window, and Cole pulled Lillian away from the table, positioning himself between her and the door. "How many?" Nora demanded. "Can't see through the snow," Thomas reported. "But someone's out there." Another shot, closer this time. Then a voice, barely audible, over the wind. "Help! Please! Someone help!" Cole exchanged glances with Nora. It could be a trap. Brant's men trying to draw them out. Or it could be someone genuinely in trouble, caught in the storm. "I'm going out," he said. "Like hell you are," Nora countered. "Someone's hurt. Or someone wants you to think that. Either way, I can't leave them out there." Cole grabbed his coat. "Cover me from the door. If it's a trap, shoot anything that moves." "Cole, wait." Lillian started, but he was already moving, pulling open the door and stepping into the maelstrom. The cold hit him like a fist, snow stinging his face, wind stealing his breath. He couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, the world reduced to white chaos. But he heard the voice again, weaker now, calling from somewhere near the barn. Cole moved toward it, his hand on the pistol at his hip, every sense screaming danger. He found them collapsed near the barn door, a young woman, maybe 18, her dress torn and bloodied, her face pale as the snow around her. And beside her, unconscious or dead, a man Cole didn't recognize. "Please," the woman gasped when she saw him. "He's hurt. Brant's men. They shot him. We ran, but—" She collapsed, her strength finally giving out. Cole made a split-second decision. Trap or not, he couldn't leave people to die in the storm. He lifted the woman, light as a child, burning with fever, and called toward the house. "Thomas! Need help with the man!" The boy appeared like a ghost in the snow, braver than he should have been, and together they dragged the unconscious man toward the farmhouse. Nora held the door open, her shotgun still at the ready, scanning the white darkness for threats. They got everyone inside and the door barred. The woman was barely conscious, shivering violently despite the fire. The man had a bullet wound in his shoulder, bleeding steadily, his breathing shallow. "Who are they?" Nora demanded. "Don't know, but we'll sort that after we keep them alive." Cole looked at Lillian. "Can you help?" "Tell me what to do." They worked through the night, Cole and Lillian tending the bullet wound while Nora tried to bring down the woman's fever. The children watched wide-eyed from their corner, old enough to understand something terrible was happening, but too young to fully grasp the implications. The man regained consciousness around 3 a.m, gasping with pain as Cole cleaned and bound his wound. "Easy," Cole said. "You're safe now." "Safe?" The man laughed bitterly. "Nowhere's safe from Brant Sykes, not anymore." "Who are you?" "Name's Daniel Foster. That's my sister Emma. We were trying to leave. Get away from Red Willow before—" He broke off, coughing. "Before what?" Before Brant killed us for knowing too much. Cole felt ice in his veins. What do you know? Everything. I worked at his lumber mill, kept his books, saw all the illegal contracts, the money laundering, the women he trafficked. Daniel's eyes found Lillian. You're the one who escaped, aren't you? Lillian Hart. Brant's been looking for you. Said you stole something that could destroy him. We have evidence, Lillian confirmed. Documents from his office. We're taking them to a lawyer in Dodge City. Daniel shook his head weakly. Won't matter. Brant's got lawyers everywhere. Got judges, sheriffs, businessmen. You can't fight him with papers and laws. He owns the system. Then how do we fight him? Cole asked. You don't. You run. Far and fast as you can. Because Brant doesn't just beat his enemies, he erases them. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, 7 people huddled around a dying fire, all of them marked for destruction by a man who owned a town, and everyone in it. Lillian moved to Cole's side, her hand finding his in the darkness. We're not running, she said quietly. Lillian, we're not running, she repeated, stronger now. We've got evidence. We've got witnesses. We've got each other. And we've got something Brant Sykes doesn't have. What's that? She smiled, fierce and beautiful in the firelight. Nothing left to lose. Cole looked around the room, at Nora with her shotgun and her fierce protection of her children, at Thomas standing guard despite his fear, at Emma and Daniel who'd risked everything to escape, at the stolen documents that represented 20 lives ruined by one man's greed. He looked at Lillian, at the woman who'd come west looking for safety and found courage instead, who taught him that caring wasn't weakness and that showing up mattered more than staying safe. And he made a choice. Then we make him pay, Cole said, for every contract, every lie, every person he's hurt. We make him pay for all of it. How? Nora asked. We stop trying to beat him at his own game, stop playing by his rules, stop being afraid of what he might do, and start making him afraid of what we will do. That's not a plan, Daniel said weakly. That's suicide. Maybe, but I'm tired of living like I'm already dead. Cole squeezed Lillian's hand. We take the fight to him, public, loud, make it impossible for him to operate in shadows, force people to choose sides instead of pretending not to see. The county fair, Lillian said suddenly. It's in 3 days if the storm clears. Everyone for 100 miles will be there. Every farmer, every family, every person Brant's ever hurt. Perfect. Nora's smile was sharp as broken glass. We make our stand where everyone can see, where witnesses and sunlight make violence harder and truth harder to hide. They spent the rest of the night planning, fueled by coffee and desperation and the strange courage that came from having nothing left to lose. By dawn, the storm had started to break, the wind dying down to a whisper, the snow thinning enough to see the barn again. And in that gray morning light, Cole Rourke looked at the people gathered in Nora Beckett's kitchen, broken, scared, determined, and realized he'd somehow assembled an army. It wasn't much of an army, but it was his. The storm cleared by afternoon, leaving the prairie transformed into a landscape of white silence, broken only by the drip of melting snow from the barn roof. Cole stood in the yard with Thomas, assessing damage. A broken fence rail, some scattered equipment, nothing that couldn't be fixed. But it was the things that couldn't be seen that worried him most. 3 days until the county fair. 3 days to turn documents and desperation into something that could actually hurt Brant Sykes. 3 days to either change everything or lose it all. Inside, Emma Foster had finally stopped shivering, the fever broken but leaving her weak as a newborn calf. Daniel's shoulder wound was clean and stitched, though he'd carry the scar forever. They'd told their story in fragments between bouts of pain and exhaustion, how they'd discovered evidence of Brant's crimes while working at the lumber mill, how they'd tried to leave quietly and been caught, how Brant's men had chased them into the storm with orders to make sure they never talked. He's getting desperate, Daniel had said, his voice thin but certain. People are starting to ask questions. The women who disappeared, the contracts that never seem to end, the accidents that happen to anyone who challenges him. Brant's empire is built on everyone being too scared to connect the pieces. So we connect them, Lillian had replied, publicly, where he can't silence us all at once. Now, watching the sun break through clouds and paint the snow with gold, Cole felt the weight of what they were planning settle onto his shoulders. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was open rebellion against a man who'd killed to protect his secrets. A man who wouldn't hesitate to kill again. The sound of hooves on snow made Cole turn. A rider was approaching from the east, alone, moving carefully through the drifts. Cole's hand went to his pistol automatically, then relaxed as he recognized the horse. It was Jacob Miller, the farmer whose contract they'd stolen from Brant's office. Miller dismounted stiffly, a man in his 50s worn down by work and worry. "Heard you had some excitement during the storm. Thought I'd check if everyone was all right." "We're managing," Cole said carefully. Miller was a good man, but you never knew who Brant might have pressured into becoming an informant. "Storm caught you out too?" "Storm caught everyone, but that's not why I'm here." Miller glanced toward the house, lowered his voice. "Word's spreading, Cole. About you and Miss Hart breaking into Brant's office. About documents going missing. About the foster kids showing up here shot and half dead." Cole's jaw tightened. "Word spreads fast." "Always does in a small town. Question is whether it spreads in your favor or Brant's." Miller met his eyes. "I want it to spread in yours." "Why?" "Because I've been paying Brant Sykes for 5 years on a loan that should have been settled in 3. Because my wife cries herself to sleep worrying we'll lose the farm. Because my son asks why we can't afford a new coat when the banker's kid has 3. Miller's voice was steady, but his hands shook. "Because I'm tired of being afraid of a man who's stealing my life piece by piece." Cole studied the older man, seeing the desperation there, the hope that was dangerous because hope made you vulnerable. "We're planning something for the county fair, something public. It's risky." "Everything's risky when you're fighting Brant Sykes, but at least this way we're fighting instead of just dying slowly." Miller pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This is my contract. Original copy. I want you to add it to whatever evidence you've got, and I'll testify. Stand up in front of the whole county and tell them what Brant's done to my family." Cole took the contract, felt the weight of it. Not just paper, but trust, hope, the possibility that they weren't as alone as he'd thought. "This could cost you everything, Jacob. Your farm, your safety, maybe your life. Already costing me everything. This way at least I get to choose what I'm paying for." Miller smiled, tired but real. "Miss Hart said something like that, didn't she? Heard it from my wife, who heard it from Nora's boy. Guess it stuck." After Miller left, promising to quietly spread word among other farmers who might be willing to stand up, Cole returned to the house. He found Lillian at the kitchen table with Emma. The two women bent over papers, cataloging evidence and testimony. Emma's hands trembled as she wrote, but her voice was steady, recounting every transaction she'd witnessed, every falsified document, every woman who'd been trafficked through Brant's network. "This is good," Lillian said, not looking up. "With Emma and Daniel's testimony, Jacob Miller's contract, the ledger we stole, we've got a real case. Not just accusations, proof." "Proof doesn't matter if no one's willing to see it," Cole pointed out. "Then we make them see." Lillian set down her pen, finally meeting his eyes. "The fair is perfect. Everyone will be there. Families, children, people from 3 counties. Brant can't just shut us down without looking like exactly what he is, a tyrant who rules through fear. He might not care how it looks if he's desperate enough. Then we make sure we're not alone when we do this. Safety in numbers. Witnesses everywhere. Make it impossible for him to silence us without condemning himself." Nora entered carrying a pot of stew, her face thoughtful. "I've been thinking about the fair. The organizing committee always has a speaker's platform for announcements and awards. What if we arranged to have time on that platform? Official and public. Hard to stop once it's started." "How do we get that arranged?" Cole asked. "Leave that to me. Margaret Hutchins runs the committee and she owes me for watching her kids last summer. Plus her husband lost money to Brant in a bad business deal. She'll help if I ask right." The plan was coming together, pieces falling into place with the kind of momentum that felt either like destiny or disaster. Cole couldn't tell which. All he knew was that they were committed now, too far in to turn back even if they wanted to. Over the next 2 days, the farmhouse became a hub of quiet rebellion. Farmers started arriving, not many, but enough. People Brant had hurt over the years, people who'd stayed silent out of fear, but were finding courage in numbers. They brought their contracts, their stories, their willingness to finally stand up. Thomas Miller came with his father's blessing and a sharp mind for organizing. Old Mrs. Chen brought documentation of the loan that had killed her husband. The blacksmith's widow arrived with evidence of property Brant had seized under dubious legal claims. Each person added to their case, their testimony, their collective voice. And Lillian orchestrated it all with the precision of a general planning a campaign. She documented everything, created copies, organized speakers, prepared presentations. Cole watched her work and marveled at the transformation. The desperate woman who'd fled Brant's saloon had become a force of nature, turning pain into power and fear into purpose. "You're remarkable," he told her late one evening as they reviewed the final preparations. Lillian looked up, surprised. "You've said that before." Bears repeating, "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "No, you're doing what most people wouldn't have the courage to do." Cole moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. "You took a bad situation and turned it into a movement. That's not just doing what needs to be done, that's leadership." Color rose in Lillian's cheeks. "I learned from watching you. The way you stood up to Brant even when it cost you. The way you helped me without asking for anything in return. The way you keep showing up even when you're scared." "I'm terrified," Cole admitted. "Me too. But we're terrified together, which somehow makes it bearable." She reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his calloused palm. "Whatever happens at the fair, I want you to know something." "What's that?" "Coming to Red Willow was supposed to be a mistake, a disaster born of bad judgment and worse luck. But meeting you, helping these people, finding something worth fighting for, that's the best mistake I ever made." Cole felt the words settle deep, finding places in his chest that had been empty so long he'd forgotten they existed. He'd spent 8 years convinced that caring was weakness, that isolation was safety, that the only way to avoid loss was to never let anything matter. But standing in Nora's kitchen with Lillian's hand in his and a house full of people who'd chosen courage over fear, Cole realized that maybe he'd had it backwards all along. Maybe the real weakness was refusing to care. Maybe true safety came from having something worth protecting. Maybe living meant accepting that loss was possible, but connection was essential. "Lillian," he said softly. "Yes?" "When this is over, when we've faced Brant and survived or didn't, I want to tell you something I haven't said to anyone in 8 years. Tell me now." "Not yet. After. When we've earned the right to think about futures instead of just surviving the present." She squeezed his hand. "Then we'd better make sure we survive." The night before the fair, Cole barely slept. He lay in the barn loft listening to the horses shift below, running through every possible scenario, every way things could go wrong. Brant would be at the fair. He sponsored half the competitions and always made a grand appearance, playing the role of benevolent community pillar. He'd have his men with him. He'd be armed. He'd be ready for trouble. They'd be walking into his territory, surrounded by his people, trying to destroy him in front of the entire county. It was insane. It was also their only shot. Cole must have finally dozed because he woke to Nora shaking his shoulder, the pre-dawn light painting the barn interior in shades of gray. "It's time," she said simply. They gathered in the kitchen for a breakfast none of them could eat. 11 people now, Nora and her 5 children, Cole, Lillian, Emma, and Daniel Foster, and Jacob Miller, who'd returned before dawn. Thomas had been dispatched to spread word among their allies, making sure everyone knew when and where to gather. Lillian wore her best dress, the deep blue one Nora had altered to fit. Her hair was pinned up elegantly, her face calm despite the fear Cole knew she had to be feeling. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman of strength and purpose, someone you'd follow into battle. "Remember," she said as they prepared to leave, addressing the group, "we stay together. We stick to the plan. And no matter what Brant does, we don't back down. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone he's hurt. Everyone he'll hurt if we don't stop him." "What if people don't listen?" Emma asked quietly, still weak from her ordeal. "Then at least we tried. At least we stood up. Sometimes that's all you can do." Lillian looked at Cole. "Right?" "Right," he agreed. "Sometimes showing up is the victory, even if you don't win the war." They loaded into wagons, Cole and Lillian in front, the others following. The ride to the fairgrounds took an hour. The morning sun bright on the snow-covered prairie, turning everything into a landscape of white and gold that would have been beautiful if Cole's stomach hadn't been twisted into knots. The fairgrounds sat on the outskirts of Red Willow, a large open field with temporary structures erected for the annual celebration. Already it was crowded with people setting up booths, arranging livestock for competition, children running wild with the freedom of a festival day. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air. Somewhere a fiddle played. It looked like celebration. It felt like a battlefield. Cole spotted Brant immediately, impossible to miss in his expensive suit, holding court near the judging platform, surrounded by his usual retinue of sycophants and hired muscle. Carlson stood at his right hand like a loyal dog. Sheriff Drummond lingered nearby, his badge catching the sunlight. Brant saw them too. Cole watched recognition flash across his face, followed by calculation, then a smile that had nothing to do with warmth. "They actually came," Brant said, loud enough to carry. "Thought maybe they'd develop some sense and run for California." "We're not running," Lillian called back, her voice clear and strong. Several people nearby turned to watch. "No? Then what are you doing? Come to enjoy the festivities? Sample my donated beef? Admire the community I've helped build?" Brant's tone was jovial, playing to the audience that was rapidly forming. "We've come to tell the truth," Cole said. "About you. About what you've done to people in this county. About the lies and theft and violence you've built your empire on." The crowd had grown larger now, people drawn by the confrontation like moths to flame. Cole saw familiar faces, farmers who'd stayed silent, merchants who'd looked the other way, families who'd been hurt but were too scared to speak up. He saw them watching, waiting to see if courage was contagious or if cowardice would win again. Brant laughed, the sound carrying across the fairgrounds. "That's quite an accusation, Rourke. You got any proof? Or is this just the desperate slander of a failed rancher and his criminal girlfriend?" "We have proof," Lillian said. She pulled out a folder of documents, holding them high where everyone could see. "Contracts with illegal interest rates, evidence of human trafficking, testimony from people you've hurt. All of it documented, all of it real." "Those are stolen property," Brant said, his smile hardening. "Taken from my office through breaking and entering. Sheriff, aren't you going to do something about this theft?" Drummond stepped forward reluctantly. "Miss Hart, Mr. Rourke, I'm going to have to ask you to surrender those documents. They were obtained illegally, and they were obtained necessarily." Jacob Miller's voice rang out. He'd climbed onto a wagon bed, making himself visible to the growing crowd. "Because the legal system in this county is owned by the man we're accusing. Because sheriffs and judges and lawyers all answer to Brant Sykes. Because the only way to get justice is to take it." A murmur ran through the crowd. Cole saw heads nodding, saw people looking at each other with dawning recognition. "Jacob Miller," Brant said, his voice hardening, "you're in violation of your loan agreement. Defamation of a creditor is grounds for immediate foreclosure. I'll have your farm by sunset." "Then take it," Miller shouted. "Take it, and prove everything we're saying is true. Show everyone here that you're exactly the tyrant we claim you are." More voices joined in now. Mrs. Chen standing up from where she'd been sitting with her grandchildren. The blacksmith's widow moving to stand beside Miller's wagon. Thomas and 3 other young men forming a protective line in front of Lillian and Cole. The crowd was shifting, Cole realized. Not completely. Plenty of people still hung back, still scared or unsure or in Brant's pocket. But enough. Enough to make this real. Lillian raised her voice, clear and strong. "We requested time on the speaker's platform today through the proper channels. Margaret Hutchins confirmed it this morning. We have the right to present our evidence publicly, to let people decide for themselves what the truth is." "Over my dead body," Brant snarled, all pretense of civility dropping away. "That can be arranged," Nora said coldly, appearing with her shotgun cradled in her arms. "But probably not the best look for the county's leading businessmen, threatening unarmed citizens at a family festival." Brant's face had gone dark with rage, but Cole could see him calculating. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. The crowd was too large, too many witnesses, too many people who were listening instead of blindly accepting his authority. "Fine," Brant said finally. "You want to make your little presentation? Go ahead. Let's see how impressive stolen documents and lies look when examined in daylight." They made their way to the speaker's platform, a raised wooden structure decorated with bunting and flags. The crowd followed, swelling to include nearly everyone at the fair. Cole estimated 300 people, maybe more. 300 witnesses. 300 potential allies or enemies. Lillian climbed the platform steps with her head high, Cole right behind her. She arranged her documents on the podium, took a breath, and began. My name is Lillian Hart. 6 weeks ago, I came to Red Willow answering an advertisement for honest work as a pianist. Instead, I found myself trapped in a fraudulent contract, locked in a room, and threatened with violence if I didn't comply with demands that were never part of our agreement. Her voice carried across the fairgrounds, clear and compelling. People leaned in to listen. I escaped with help from Cole Rourke, who paid off my supposed debt. But that was just the beginning. Because what happened to me wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern, a system, an empire built on exploiting people who had nowhere else to turn. She held up the ledger. This is Brant Sykes' own record of women he's trafficked through Red Willow over the past 2 years. 23 women. Some escaped. Some disappeared. All of them lured here with promises of legitimate work, then trapped in contracts that turned them into property. A gasp ran through the crowd. Cole saw mothers pulling children closer, saw men's faces hardening with anger. That's fabrication, Brant shouted from below. She's making it up. Then explain the entries, Lillian shot back. Explain the dates and names and amounts. Explain why Emma Foster, who worked in your office, can verify every word of this ledger because she helped maintain it. Emma stepped forward, her voice shaky but determined. It's true. All of it. I saw the women arrive, saw them realize they'd been tricked, saw what happened to the ones who tried to leave. She's lying to save herself, Brant countered. I fired her for theft and now she's trying to... I'm not lying. Emma's voice grew stronger. And I'm not the only witness. Daniel Foster, my brother. Mrs. Chen, whose husband's death was ruled an accident but came 3 days after he threatened to expose your loan scheme. The families who lost their farms to foreclosures based on contracts with illegal interest rates. One by one, people started stepping forward. Jacob Miller sharing his contract, others following his lead. A wave of testimony building like a storm surge, each voice adding to the truth until it was too big to deny. Cole watched Brant's face cycle through emotions, rage, fear, calculation. Watched him looking for an out, an escape, a way to shut this down before it destroyed him completely. And then Brant made his move. Enough, he roared, his hand dropping to his pistol. This is nothing but a coordinated attack by criminals and degenerates. Sheriff, I'm ordering you to arrest these people for theft, fraud, and defamation. Drummond looked torn, his allegiance to Brant warring with the reality of 300 witnesses watching his every move. On whose authority? Nora called out. You're not a lawman, Brant. You're just a businessman, and these people are exercising their right to speak. I'm exercising my right to protect my property and reputation. Brant pulled his pistol, pointing it at the platform. At Lillian. You want to destroy me? Then let's see how brave you are when... The shot rang out before he could finish, but Brant didn't fire. Cole did. He'd drawn faster than thought, muscle memory from the war taking over, and his bullet caught Brant's pistol dead center, knocking it from his hand. The gun spun away into the snow, and Brant stood there clutching his stinging hand, his face a mask of shock. The fairgrounds went silent. You just shot at me, Brant said, his voice hollow with disbelief. Shot your gun, Cole corrected. If I'd wanted to shoot you, you'd be on the ground. You're a dead man, Rourke, you and everyone who... No! The voice came from the edge of the crowd, a man in his 60s, well-dressed, carrying himself with authority. Cole didn't recognize him, but saw Brant's face go white. Judge Morrison, Brant said. I didn't know you were... I came for the festival, heard there might be interesting developments. Judge Morrison walked forward, the crowd parting for him. I've been listening to these testimonies with great interest, particularly the evidence of illegal interest rates and potential human trafficking. These are serious allegations that warrant investigation. They're lies, all lies. These people are citizens with rights, Mr. Sykes. Rights that include being heard. Rights that include protection under law. The judge's voice was cold. I'm ordering an immediate investigation into all the contracts and agreements presented here today. Until that investigation is complete, all foreclosure proceedings are suspended. All outstanding debts are frozen. And you, Mr. Sykes, are forbidden from making any contact with potential witnesses. Brant looked around wildly, seeing his empire crumbling. You can't do this. I have connections. You have nothing but allegations and angry citizens, Morrison said flatly. Be grateful I'm not ordering your immediate arrest. Go home, Mr. Sykes, and pray that this investigation finds you less guilty than you appear. For a moment, Cole thought Brant might fight, might call his men to violence despite the witnesses and consequences. But even Brant Sykes could read the room. His support was melting away, people literally stepping back from association with him. Even Carlson looked uncertain, his loyalty wavering under the weight of public condemnation. This isn't over, Brant said, but the words were hollow. Yes, Lillian said from the platform, her voice ringing clear. It is. Brant turned and stalked away, his men following, leaving behind a fairground buzzing with conversation and possibility. People crowded forward, wanting to see the documents, to add their own stories, to be part of something that felt like the beginning of real change. Cole barely processed any of it. He was watching Lillian, seeing her smile transform her whole face, seeing her accept congratulations and thanks from people who'd found courage in her example. She was remarkable. She was brave. She was looking at him. Their eyes met across the platform, and in that moment, Cole felt something shift in his chest. Not breaking, opening, like a door he'd kept locked for 8 years was finally swinging wide. Lillian descended from the platform and walked toward him through the crowd. People parted for her, speaking words Cole didn't hear. All he saw was her, moving toward him with purpose. We did it, she said when she reached him. You did it. I just shot a gun. You did more than that. You showed up. You stood with me. She stopped, seeming to struggle for words. You're not afraid anymore. Or you are, but you're standing here anyway. Learned it from someone, Cole said softly. Yeah? Who's that? Woman I met 6 weeks ago. Came to town looking for honest work. Found trouble instead. Decided to fight back rather than run away. Taught me that being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling it and showing up anyway. Lillian's eyes glistened. I should thank her. Could. Or you could let me thank you instead. For what? Cole reached for her hand, felt her fingers curl around his. For reminding me what it feels like to be alive. For showing me that caring isn't weakness. For making me believe that maybe you deserve to be loved anyway, Lillian said, fierce and certain. Whatever you think you did or didn't do in the war, whatever losses you've suffered, whatever walls you built to survive, you deserve to be loved anyway. The words hit Cole like a benediction, permission he hadn't known he needed. And there, in the middle of the Red Willow County Fair, surrounded by 300 witnesses and the wreckage of Brant Sykes' empire, Cole Rourke did something he hadn't done in 8 years. He let himself hope. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected, maybe because Judge Morrison was thorough, or maybe because the evidence was so damning that even Brant's bought lawyers couldn't explain it away. Within 2 weeks, formal charges were filed: fraud, usury, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, and a dozen other counts that added up to enough prison time to keep Brant Sykes locked away until he was too old to hurt anyone. The trial was set for spring, which gave Cole and Lillian a strange sort of limbo, free from immediate danger, but not yet free from the shadow of what they'd started. Brant made bail, of course, but his power had evaporated like morning frost. Businesses stopped dealing with him. Farmers stopped paying the fraudulent interest on their loans. Even Carlson and his other hired men drifted away, sensing a sinking ship. Red Willow had changed, not overnight, not completely, but enough. People walked straighter, spoke louder, made eye contact instead of looking away when injustice passed by. The town that had been Brant's kingdom was learning how to be a community again. And in the middle of that transformation, Cole was learning something too. He was learning how to live. It started small. He accepted an invitation to Sunday dinner at the Miller farm. He lingered in town after buying supplies to actually talk to people instead of conducting transactions in silence. He smiled at Nora's children when they asked him to help with their schoolwork, and the smile felt less rusty each time. But mostly, he spent time with Lillian. They'd fallen into a rhythm over those weeks, Cole riding to Nora's farm most evenings, helping with chores and staying for supper, then sitting on the porch with Lillian while the stars came out and the prairie wind whispered secrets. They talked about everything and nothing, about childhoods and dreams and the strange path that had brought them both to this moment, about the trial and what came after, though neither of them wanted to think too hard about futures that still felt fragile. "What will you do?" Cole asked one evening as November turned to December and the air took on the sharp bite of coming winter. "After the trial, when this is all settled." Lillian was quiet for a moment, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold. "I don't know. I came west looking for a fresh start, and I suppose I found one, just not the way I expected." She glanced at him. "What about you? Back to your ranch and your carefully controlled solitude?" "Don't think solitude would take me back at this point. I've gotten too used to noise and conversation and people who care whether I show up." "That sounds almost like growth, Cole Rourke. Don't spread it around. I've got a reputation to maintain." She laughed, and the sound warmed something in Cole's chest that had been cold so long he'd forgotten what warmth felt like. These moments with Lillian had become the axis his days turned on, the thing he looked forward to, planned around, needed in a way that would have terrified him 2 months ago. Now it just felt right. "Can I tell you something?" Lillian said. "Always. I'm scared. Not of Brant anymore, or the trial, or any of that. I'm scared of what comes after. Of building something real here, and then having it fall apart like everything else I've tried to build." Cole understood that fear intimately. It was the same one that had kept him isolated for 8 years. The same one that whispered caring was dangerous and connection led to loss. "Me too," he admitted. "Every time I ride over here, part of me thinks this will be the day you realize you're better off without a damaged cowboy who doesn't know how to talk about his feelings and flinches when things get too good." "Do I seem like someone who scares easy?" "No, but I seem like someone who might scare you off anyway." Lillian shifted closer, close enough that he could feel her warmth in the cold air. "Cole, look at me." He did. Her eyes were steady in the lamplight spilling from the house, full of something that made his heart do complicated things. "You're not damaged," she said firmly. "You're healing. There's a difference. And you don't have to know how to talk about feelings perfectly. You just have to show up and try. That's all any of us can do. And if I'm not good at it, then you'll practice. With someone who's not good at it either. We'll figure it out together." She took his hand, her fingers cold against his. "That's what partnership means, isn't it? Not being perfect, just being present." Cole felt something crack open in his chest, not painfully, but like ice breaking to let water flow again. "I want that," he said quietly. "Partnership, presence, a future that's more than just survival." "With me? If you'll have me." Lillian's smile was like sunrise. "I think I could manage that." They sat together in the cold, hands intertwined, both thinking about futures that had seemed impossible a few weeks ago and now felt inevitable. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Closer, in the house, children's laughter bubbled up like spring water. "There's something I need to tell you," Cole said. "Something I said I'd wait until after we'd survived to say. I remember, the night before the fair." "Yeah." Cole took a breath, the words harder than facing down Brant had been. "I spent 8 years convinced I didn't deserve good things. Didn't deserve connection or joy or love. Convinced myself that being alone was safer than risking loss. And then you stumbled into my life and turned everything upside down. That's my specialty." "It is. And I'm grateful for it. Because you taught me that the opposite of loss isn't safety. It's never caring enough to lose anything in the first place. And that's not living. That's just waiting to die." Lillian's grip on his hand tightened. "So what I want to tell you," Cole continued, "what I've been trying to work up the courage to say, is that I care about you, Lillian Hart. I care about you in a way that terrifies me and thrills me and makes me want to be better than I've been. I care about you enough to risk the loss, enough to try for the future, enough to—" "I love you too," Lillian said softly. Cole stopped, the words he'd been building toward stolen by her directness. "I didn't say love." "You were about to." "Was I?" "Yes. And I'm saying it first because one of us has to be brave enough. And apparently today, it's my turn. She turned to face him fully. I love you, Cole. I love your quiet strength and your terrible jokes that you deliver with no expression. I love how you show up for people even when it costs you. I love that you're learning how to let yourself be happy. I love you, and I'm not waiting until some perfect moment to say it, because perfect moments don't exist, and I'm tired of pretending feelings should be neat and tidy. Cole stared at her, this remarkable woman who'd walked into his life with nothing but a valise and determination and somehow turned his carefully controlled world into chaos and joy and possibility. I love you too, he said, and the words came easier than he'd expected. Don't know what I'm doing. Don't know how to do this right, but I love you anyway. Good, Lillian said, because I don't know what I'm doing either. We'll figure it out as we go. And then she kissed him. It wasn't Cole's first kiss. The war and the years after had taught him that much about living. But it was his first kiss that felt like hope. His first kiss that wasn't about forgetting or escape, but about building something. His first kiss with someone who knew his damage and loved him anyway. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard and smiling, Nora's voice called from the doorway. About damn time, you two. Now get in here before you freeze to death. I didn't help orchestrate a revolution just to lose you to hypothermia. They laughed and went inside, hands still linked, and Cole realized this was what home felt like. Not a place, not solitude, but people who cared whether you lived or died, whether you were happy or sad, whether you showed up or stayed away. People who made showing up worth it. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation for the trial and quiet moments stolen between chaos. Cole worked his ranch, but found himself spending more time at Nora's farm, helping with repairs and harvest work, becoming part of the fabric of the place. The children started calling him Uncle Cole, which made him uncomfortable in a way he secretly loved. Lillian threw herself into organizing testimony and evidence, becoming an unofficial advocate for everyone Brant had hurt. She worked with Judge Morrison's office, with lawyers from Dodge City, with families who'd stayed silent for years and were finally finding their voices. She was brilliant and tireless, and exactly the kind of force that changed the world one determined act at a time. And in the evenings, after work was done and responsibilities met, they found each other. Sometimes on Nora's porch, sometimes walking the prairie under stars that seemed close enough to touch, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence because not every moment needed words. They were building something, not quickly, not perfectly, but real. Winter came in earnest in mid-December, bringing snow that lasted and cold that tested every seal and shutter. The trial was postponed until spring when travel would be easier and witnesses could make it to the county seat. Brant remained free on bail but isolated, living in his house like a deposed king waiting for execution. And then, 2 weeks before the winter solstice, everything changed again. Cole was working in his barn when Thomas Miller came racing up on horseback, his face flushed with cold and excitement. Mr. Rourke, you gotta come quick! Brant's house is on fire! They rode hard toward town, smoke visible long before the house came into view. By the time they arrived, half of Red Willow had gathered to watch Brant Sykes' mansion burn. The fire brigade worked their pumps uselessly. The well had frozen, the water wouldn't flow, and the flames had too much of a head start anyway. Cole found Sheriff Drummond in the crowd. Anyone inside? Don't know. Haven't seen Brant since yesterday. House was locked up tight. We need to check. It's too dangerous. The whole structure's going to collapse. Cole was already moving, pulling his coat over his face, heading toward the burning building. He heard Drummond yelling behind him but didn't stop. If there was even a chance someone was trapped inside, even if that someone was Brant Sykes, Cole couldn't stand by and watch them burn. The heat hit him like a wall. He pushed through the front door, now hanging loose on its hinges, into an inferno of smoke and flame. The grand staircase he remembered was fully engulfed. The parlor was a mass of fire. But off to the left, in what had been Brant's study, Cole heard something. Movement. Maybe. He followed the sound, ducking under a falling beam, his lungs screaming for clean air. The study door was closed, but not locked. Cole kicked it open and found Brant Sykes slumped over his desk, unconscious or dead, surrounded by empty bottles and what looked like scattered papers. No time to check. Cole grabbed Brant under the arms and dragged him toward the door, feeling the man's weight like dead weight, appropriate and horrible. The ceiling was groaning, ready to collapse. Smoke was everywhere, burning Cole's eyes and throat. He made it to the front door just as a section of the second floor gave way, crashing down into the parlor in an explosion of sparks and ash. Men rushed forward to help, pulling both Cole and Brant away from the building, getting them clear just before the whole structure collapsed inward with a roar like a dying beast. Cole lay in the snow, coughing up smoke, while someone, Mrs. Hutchins, he thought, poured water over his face and arms. His hands were burned, his lungs felt scorched, but he was alive. And so, somehow, was Brant Sykes. The doctor worked on Brant while Cole recovered, and it was an hour before anyone could piece together what had happened. Brant had been drinking heavily, surrounded by his financial records, apparently planning to burn them rather than let them be used in court. He'd started the fire deliberately but lost control of it, the flames spreading faster than his alcohol-clouded mind could process. He'd tried to save some documents, gotten trapped by smoke, and would have died if Cole hadn't pulled him out. "Why'd you do it?" Drummond asked as they watched the embers of what had been Red Willow's grandest house. "Why risk your life for a man who's tried to destroy you?" Cole thought about the question. Thought about Tommy Chen dying in his arms. Thought about all the people he'd lost and all the grief he'd carried. Thought about what Lillian had taught him, about showing up, about being present, about choosing who you wanted to be instead of letting fear choose for you. "Because standing by and watching someone die makes you smaller," he said, finally. "Even if they're your enemy, even if they deserve it. The man I want to be saves people when he can, even the ones who don't deserve saving." Drummond nodded slowly. "You're a better man than me, Cole Rourke." "Don't think that's true. Just think I've been given enough second chances that I owe the universe a few." When Cole finally made it to Nora's farm, exhausted and smoke-stained and aching in every muscle, Lillian met him at the door. She took one look at him and pulled him into her arms without a word, holding him while he shook with delayed reaction and relief and something that might have been tears. "You saved him," she said finally. "After everything he did to you, to me, to everyone. You saved him anyway. Couldn't let him burn. I know, that's who you are. It's one of the reasons I love you." She pulled back to look at his face, her eyes wet. "But if you ever scare me like that again, I'll kill you myself." "Fair enough?" They stood together in the doorway while Nora bustled around inside preparing food and fussing over Cole's burns, and generally being the force of nature she was. The children peppered Cole with questions about the fire and heroics, and whether Brant was going to die. Thomas looked at him with something like worship, which made Cole deeply uncomfortable. "I'm not a hero," he told the boy. "Just did what needed doing." "That's what heroes do," Thomas replied with the certainty of 14 years. "They do what needs doing when everyone else is too scared." Later, after the children were asleep and Nora had retreated to her room with a knowing smile, Cole and Lillian sat by the fire. His hands were bandaged, his throat raw, but he felt strangely at peace. "The trial will be different now," Lillian said quietly. "Public sympathy is already shifting. The man whose empire you helped destroy, you saved his life. People are going to remember that." "Don't care about public sympathy. I know. But it matters anyway. It shows people that justice doesn't have to be revenge. That we can hold someone accountable for their crimes while still treating them with basic human dignity." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You showed them that today. Just didn't want to watch someone burn." "I know. And that's exactly the point." They sat in silence for a while, watching flames dance in the fireplace, both thinking about fires and transformations and the strange alchemy that turned damage into healing. "Cole?" Lillian said softly. "Yeah?" "When this is all over, when the trial is done, and Brant is sentenced and we can finally breathe without looking over our shoulders, what do you want?" Cole thought about the question, really thought about it. 6 months ago, he would have said safety, solitude, a life small enough that loss couldn't touch it. But sitting here with Lillian warm against his side and Nora's children sleeping safe in the next room, and the knowledge that he'd saved a life today instead of just protecting his own isolation, Cole realized his answer had changed. "I want a life," he said. "A real one. Not just survival or going through motions. I want to wake up every morning with a reason to get out of bed. I want work that matters and people who care and moments that take my breath away. He turned to look at her. I want you, every day, for as long as you'll have me. Lillian's eyes glistened in the firelight. That sounds like a proposal, Cole Rourke. Does it? It does. Well, Cole took a breath, feeling fear and hope warring in his chest. What if it was? A proposal? Yeah. Are you asking? Trying to work up to it? Lillian laughed, bright and joyful. Then let me save you the trouble. Yes. I haven't asked yet. You were going to, and I'm impatient. So yes, Cole Rourke, I will marry you and build a life with you and wake up every morning giving you reasons to get out of bed. Yes to all of it. Cole felt his heart do something complicated in his chest, joy and terror and gratitude tangling together. I don't have a ring. Don't need one. I've got your word, and that's worth more than gold. I'm not easy to live with. I'm damaged and difficult, and I don't know how to— Stop, Lillian said firmly. You're healing. I'm healing. We'll heal together. That's how this works. And then she kissed him, and Cole stopped arguing because arguing with Lillian Hart was a losing battle, and kissing her was infinitely better anyway. They were married 3 weeks later in a ceremony at Nora's farm, with Judge Morrison officiating and half the county in attendance. It wasn't the wedding either of them had imagined. Too simple, too rushed, too unconventional. But it was perfect in all the ways that mattered. The children threw rice that they'd painstakingly dyed with beet juice. Nora cried and pretended she wasn't. Jacob Miller played fiddle while his wife sang old songs about love and promises. And when Cole took Lillian's hand and promised to love her through damage and healing, through fear and courage, through every day they were given, he meant every word. Brant Sykes attended the trial in March looking older and smaller than anyone remembered. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimony devastating. Judge Morrison handed down a sentence of 15 years, and Brant was led away in chains to serve time in the territorial prison. Some people said justice had been served. Others said the sentence was too harsh or too lenient, depending on their politics and history. Cole didn't care much either way. Brant was no longer a threat. The people he'd hurt could begin rebuilding. That was enough. What mattered more was what came after. Cole sold his ranch, the land that had been his refuge and his prison for 8 years. He got a fair price from a young couple moving west who promised to treat it well. He used part of the money to buy land adjacent to Nora's farm, acreage that had potential for expansion and community. The rest he invested in a dream that Lillian had mentioned one evening while they planned their future. He built her a house, not a mansion like Brant's had been, not pretentious or grand, just a solid, well-made home with wide windows that let in light, and a porch for watching sunsets, and most importantly, a room facing east with space for a piano. The piano arrived on a spring morning, shipped from Kansas City, and carried carefully into the house by 6 men who knew its value wasn't monetary, but emotional. It was a beautiful instrument, mahogany and ivory, with a tone that filled the room like water filling a cup. Lillian cried when she saw it. Cole, this is too much. We can't afford— We can. And we'll make more music than this piano's ever heard. You'll teach Nora's children, maybe some others. Fill this house with songs and students and joy. He pulled her close. You brought music back into my silent world. Seemed right to give you an instrument worthy of that. She played that evening, her fingers finding familiar melodies and new ones, filling their new home with sound that transformed space into place, house into home. Cole sat on the porch listening, watching the sun set over prairie that stretched forever, thinking about time and choice and the strange paths that led people to exactly where they needed to be. Nora appeared with a basket of food. She'd made it her mission to keep them fed through the chaos of moving and building. She sat beside Cole, both of them listening to Lillian play. You did good, Nora said finally. We'll see. Still figuring this out. You saved her. She saved you. You saved a whole town from a tyrant. I'd say you figured enough out. Didn't save the town, just helped it save itself. Same thing sometimes. Nora patted his knee. Tommy Chen would be proud of you, you know. The boy you told me about, the one who died at Shiloh. He'd see who you've become and be proud. Cole felt his throat tighten. Don't know about that. I do, because that's what love does. It makes us better than we thought we could be, braver than we knew how to be, more alive than we've ever been. She stood, brushing off her skirts. Now I'm going to leave you two alone because that music deserves better audience than an old widow. But I'll be back tomorrow to help plant that garden Lillian's been planning. After she left, Cole sat alone listening to Lillian play, and he realized this was happiness, not the absence of pain or fear or difficulty, not perfect days or easy answers. Just this. Music in the evening, a woman he loved making their house into home, prairie wind carrying the scent of growing things, and the knowledge that tomorrow he'd wake up beside someone who knew his damage and loved him anyway. Lillian finished her song and came to join him on the porch, settling into his arms like she'd been made to fit there. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm happy? Terrified and uncertain about 1,000 things, but happy." "Good. You deserve happy. So do you." They sat together watching stars emerge one by one against the darkening sky, and Cole thought about futures and possibilities and all the ways life could still surprise you if you were brave enough to let it. "Lillian," he said softly. "Hmm? Thank you." "For what?" "For stumbling into my life with a torn dress and determination. For refusing to give up when giving up would have been easier. For teaching me that being alive isn't the same as just surviving. For loving me even when I couldn't love myself." He kissed the top of her head. "For everything." Lillian turned in his arms to face him, her eyes bright in the starlight. "You want to know something?" "Always." "When I came west, I thought I was looking for safety, for a place to hide from my mistakes and start over with a clean slate. But what I found was so much better." "What was that?" "Someone to stand with instead of hiding behind. Someone who showed me that courage isn't fearlessness. It's just fear that's decided to show up anyway." She touched his face gently. "You gave me that, Cole. You showed up when you didn't have to. You cared when it cost you. You loved when it scared you. You gave me something worth fighting for. Pretty sure that was a mutual exchange. Then we're both lucky." "Yeah, we are." As summer turned to autumn and autumn to winter again, their life found its rhythm. Lillian taught piano to children from 3 counties, transforming their east-facing room into a studio filled with music and laughter. Cole worked the land with Nora's oldest son, Thomas, teaching him ranching and learning from him about the changing times. They built a community, not perfect, still healing from Brant's damage, but better. Growing. And on a cold December evening, exactly 1 year after they'd married, Lillian took Cole's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We're going to need a bigger house," she said, smiling. Cole felt his heart stop and restart, joy flooding through him like spring water. I am. Baby's due in late spring. Thought you should know." "A baby." The words felt foreign and wonderful. "We're having a baby." "We are. Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Good. Me too. We can be terrified together." Lillian leaned against him, and Cole wrapped his arms around her, around them, around the future they were building one day at a time. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." "And Cole?" "Yeah?" "You're going to be an amazing father, broken parts and all, maybe especially because of them." Cole thought about Tommy Chen and soldiers who'd died too young, thought about his own father crushed under a horse, thought about all the ways loss had shaped him and all the ways love was reshaping him again. "I'm going to try," he said. "That's all anyone can do." They stood together on their porch as the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and silent and transforming. Cole thought about time and second chances and the strange grace that let broken things become beautiful if given enough care. The baby came in May, a boy with Lillian's dark eyes and Cole's quiet determination. They named him Thomas, after the friend who'd died and the boy who'd helped them fight. Young Thomas Miller cried when he found out, then declared himself the baby's protector and took the job seriously enough to make everyone smile. Nora helped with the delivery and the sleepless weeks after, teaching them how to survive on no rest and infinite love. The community rallied, farmers bringing food, mothers offering advice, children wanting to see the baby who'd become a symbol of Red Willow's renewal. And late one night, When Lillian was sleeping exhausted and Thomas Jr. was finally quiet in his cradle, Cole sat alone on the porch, listening to the prairie wind and thinking about promises. He'd promised Tommy Chen he'd tell Susan the truth. He'd kept that promise even when it hurt. He'd promised himself he'd never care again. He'd broken that promise and was grateful every day. He'd promised Lillian he'd show up. He'd try. He'd love her through damage and healing. That promise he intended to keep until his last breath. And now he had a new promise to make, to this tiny human who depended on him completely, who didn't care about his damage or his past or his fears, who just needed him to be present and loving and brave enough to keep showing up. I promise, Cole whispered to the night, to his son, to the future. I promise I'll teach you that being scared is okay, that caring is worth the risk, that showing up is the victory even when you don't win. I promise I'll tell you about the man you're named for, both of them. I promise I'll love your mother with everything I have and show you what partnership looks like. I promise I'll be here, not perfect, just present. The baby made a small sound, not quite crying, just existing. Cole went inside and lifted his son from the cradle, feeling the weight of him, the warmth, the absolute trust. He carried Thomas to the window that faced east, the one that let in morning light and Lillian's music. You're loved, Cole told his son. You're wanted. You're going to grow up in a house filled with music and on land filled with possibility. You're going to know that your parents were broken and healed and chose each other anyway. You're going to learn that the opposite of fear isn't courage, it's love. Love big enough to risk the loss. Love that shows up anyway. Lillian appeared in the doorway, sleepy and smiling. Talking to our son about philosophy? Seemed like the right time. He's 3 weeks old. He just wants milk and sleep. He'll want philosophy eventually. Figured I'd practice. She crossed to them, wrapping her arms around Cole's waist, the three of them standing together in their east-facing room while dawn broke over the prairie. Somewhere in the distance, Nora's rooster crowed. Closer, in the barn, horses whinnied greeting to the new day. We did it, Lillian said softly. We built something real. We're building it, every day, little by little. And you're not scared anymore? Still terrified. But the scared part is getting smaller and the grateful part is getting bigger. Cole kissed her forehead, then his son's. I used to think I didn't deserve good things, that I'd lost my chance at happiness when Tommy died and I came home broken. Spent 8 years convinced that being alone was safer than risking my heart. And now? Now I know that you deserve to be loved anyway. We all do. Broken parts and mistakes and fears and all of it. We deserve to show up for each other, to try, to build futures instead of hiding from pasts. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. Say that again. Which part? The part about deserving love. Cole looked at her. This remarkable woman who'd stumbled into his life and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. Looked at his son, perfect and tiny and trusting. Looked at the room they'd built together, the life they were creating, the future stretching out before them filled with possibility and risk and joy. You deserve to be loved anyway, he said clearly. Not despite your damage, but with it. Not when you're fixed, but while you're healing. Not someday, but right now, exactly as you are. We all deserve that, Lillian whispered. Yeah, we do. The sun climbed higher, painting their room in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in the house, the piano waited for Lillian's touch. Outside, the land waited for spring planting. In town, Red Willow was waking up to another day, still healing from Brant's damage but getting better, growing stronger, learning what community meant when it wasn't ruled by fear. And in a house on the prairie, a family stood together watching the sunrise, not because their story was over, but because it was just beginning. Not because they'd found perfect happiness, but because they'd found something better. The courage to keep showing up for each other. The wisdom to know that love was worth the risk, and the grace to believe that maybe, just maybe, they deserved the beautiful thing they were building together. Cole Rourke had spent 8 years learning how to survive. Now, with Lillian's hand in his, and his son sleeping in his arms, and the morning sun painting everything in light, he was finally learning how to live. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.